Could I get everyone to find your seats, please? Now make sure and hashtag that picture, Governor's Broadband Summit. All right, well, we have a wonderful turnout this morning. First of all, thank you very much for everyone that's joining us this morning for our 2018 Wyoming Governor's Broadband Summit. I'll cover just a few quick logistics and we'll get our program kicked off. I'd like to, of course, thank you, industry, for showing up. Obviously, you're represented very heavily, and we very much appreciate that. In addition to that, I'd like to thank our numerous legislators that have decided to join us this morning. We appreciate your attendance as well. If you haven't checked in or registered, please do so. We have some representatives out in the foyer that will help you get your credentials. If we run out of seats, we are working with Little America to see if we can get some additional seating around the back. Again, a good kind of problem with an amazing turnout this morning. Housekeeping, so the restrooms, if you head out the right side of the room, my right, your left, and walk all the way down the hall, the men's and women's restrooms are down there. Wi-Fi is available. It is, see if Alan can throw that splash screen up. It is LA Cheyenne Meeting 2 with a password of Cheyenne 2. I'm not going to butcher that. I'll let him throw it up so you can see that. Should you have any questions throughout some of our speakers' keynotes or presentations, we ask that you use the microphone. We obviously have this live stream today, and so there's going to be a number of people that are watching from afar. And if we have those questions saved for use of a microphone, that'll help tremendously. The microphone is available at the broadband booth. The broadcast booth. We will do our best to kind of have it available and walk it around the room. So with that said, I'd like to start the day off with introducing our esteemed guest. The Honorable Governor Matthew H. Mead is joining us this morning. During his 2 terms, Governor Mead is focused on making improvements through technology innovation. He moved the entire state to a 100 gigabit broadband network. His focus on increasing state competitiveness, for example, through technology, innovation, and expansion of business opportunities in numerous economic sectors has brought national recognition. Unfortunately, this will be our last time welcoming Governor Mead to the stage, but if you would, please help me in asking him to come up.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, 1, for being here, and 2, giving me some time. I started thinking about this when I first came into office. I thought, you know, if we title it the Governor's Broadband Summit, they'll have to invite me every year. And so it's worked out very well. A couple of things this morning, and first and foremost, a message to thanks to all of you in the private sector. I'm going to go through this morning a little bit of where we were and where we are now, and some incredible changes have happened in the state of Wyoming. So to those of you in the private sector, I want to thank you. It's been a remarkable transformation in 8 years. To members of the legislature that are here, also a message of thanks to you as well. When we started 8 years ago, I think we worked through some difficult issues. I think we've made some important changes for the state of Wyoming, all exciting, and I'm as excited as I am today. I think that we'll see even greater changes in the future, led by the new administration and the legislature, and I'm excited to see those changes as well. One of the reasons we started this broadband summit is I thought it was important to get members of the private sector along with members of government, legislators in a room together to talk about connectivity and broadband and where we were in the state of Wyoming and where we could go. And in fact, it was in 2010 when I was first running, I had mentioned that this was one of my top priorities, is improving connectivity in the state of Wyoming. At the time, I had Tony Young, now head of ETS, who is the partner in this summit, on the road with me, and I think he took great pride in, he wanted me to introduce him as a geek, in a complimentary way. And once I figured out that was a complimentary way, I said, well, can you call me Governor Geek? And he's refused to do that at any time. But we tried to make the analogy, and perhaps a poor one on the campaign trail, about the importance of connectivity. And I said, you know, there was a day in Wyoming and a day in all the states where we didn't have any paved roads. And, you know, we were out on the dirt roads and we were kicking around the dirt and saying, you know, do you think we ought to improve these roads? What would that do for commerce? What would it do for safety? What would it do for opportunities for the citizens? The same way with the railroads. Think about what the railroads meant to our country and to our state. Be able to have that commerce travel, to have people travel, to connect people through traveling. That same idea is the connection. And I thought it held true for connectivity through broadband. What would it mean to the state of Wyoming, 10th largest state, most rural state, smallest population, and being able to have this connectivity? And I was convinced then, as I am now, that when you have a quality of life like we do in the state of Wyoming, to have the connectivity allows you to live and work in the places that you want to. It allows us to have this commerce. It allows us to address tough issues like healthcare, telemedicine, teleeducation. It allows us to expand our opportunities as we're trying to do with international trade. There's so much that it provides to the state of Wyoming, and so I have said, consistent with my theme in 2010, the importance of this connectivity is the same importance as railroads, the same importance as roads. And if we as a state start thinking about, do we want roads? Of course we want roads. Do we want good roads? Of course we do. The same should be said with fiber. Do we want it? Absolutely we do. Do we need it? Absolutely we do. And it not only meets so many of our basic needs in the state of Wyoming, a rural state, it also provides this important outreach to our young people. We lose, as many of you know, as we have moved forward with Endow, so many of our young people from the state of Wyoming. Roughly 60%, ages 18 to 25. And there's a lot that goes to that. I understand that. But for our young people, if we as a state don't have a message that we are moving forward, that we are doing these things that provide the connectivity, we'll continue to lose more of our young people. Part of Endow is the Engage group, which is a younger group, ages 16 to 35. They've done a remarkable job helping the Endow initiative overall. But when you talk to them, it's not even a question as to whether or not you need to improve connectivity. It's an expectation, and it should be an expectation. And it's one we as Wyoming should embrace. How do we make improvements? The other reason this conference is important is to celebrate some of the successes. And I just want to share some of the things that just recently we have seen. First, starting off, many of you saw Silver Star's announcement just yesterday, which was great timing. I asked that they make this announcement so I could announce it again today. And they said yes, although I think that was the plan all along. But I like to pretend I had some effect on that. Silver Star announced Wyoming's first 10 gigabit broadband. The initial service will start in late November with Jackson Hole Airport as an early adopter. It's a congratulations to Silver Star and the Jackson Hole Airport. And Jerry Bland is here with us from Jackson Hole Airport, and I congratulate him on the way in. He said, geez, I just don't know what we're going to do with all that. And I said, that's a lot of videos, a lot of videos. We also, I just want to go through this. So many companies have made such great advancements. Range Telephone Cooperative has approximately 800 miles of fiber in Wyoming. It has installed fiber to the premise in Sundance, has invested over $18 million in the last 8 years in infrastructure. RT Communications, the last 8 years, $44 million invested in fiber network. Installed fiber to the premise in Worland and Thermopolis. Is in the process of delivering fiber to the premise in Newcastle and Pine Bluffs. Du Bois Telephone Exchange, since 2011, has invested over $11 million in fiber projects, deployed fiber to the premise in Du Bois and Bags, add a total of 150 miles of fiber for a total of 570 miles of fiber. Advanced Communications Technology, ACT, since 2011 has doubled its fiber assets by investing over $13 million in fiber projects. Silver Star, in addition to what I just mentioned, since 2015 has connected over 600 businesses in gigabit-capable fiber. All West, 27 miles of conduit and fiber from Sage Junction to Cokeville. And for those of you who don't know where Sage Junction and Cokeville are, they are our biggest cities in Wyoming. They're not. 34 miles of fiber from Sage Junction to Kemmer and Diamondville, doubled their backbone capacity and built in full redundancy. Union Telephone, since 2013, has laid over 550 miles of fiber, currently has over 444 miles of fiber permitting in the works, and is in the process of building fiber to homes in Saratoga. Charter Communication launched gigabit-capable connectivity to all of its Wyoming customers. CenturyLink, of course, a big player in the state of Wyoming, and was absolutely key in getting us the unified network completed. So to all of you, from many of those companies, congratulations. That's a lot of work, a lot of money, and a lot of planning in a very relatively short period of time. You all have been building our roads in this state of Wyoming, and it's appreciated. The Wyoming legislature has been working hard, and last session we saw a couple of very important changes. One is the Broadband Council, also a Broadband Coordinator, and our new Broadband Coordinator, Russ Elliott, who you'll hear from later, is here today. But the Advisory Council began work early, and has come up with a bold vision. Their vision is this: the vision of the plan is to leave no Wyoming citizen behind and position every business to compete on a global scale by ensuring they each connect to the rest of the digital world with broadband internet capabilities that set the standard for all others to follow by 2025. I think that's incredibly bold, incredibly proud of the plan, and I also think it's incredibly doable. We look forward to their success. A little more history of where we were and where we are now. When I came into office, we didn't have ETS. And ETS, Enterprise Technology Services, has been a great thing for the state of Wyoming, because when I came in, and this is going to be hard for you to believe, we had different email systems in the state of Wyoming, to the point that one email system wouldn't even know the addresses of the other email system. So when it didn't work, we would just go out on the street and holler across the street at one another. No, I'm kidding. We didn't do that. I saw one look. Really? You did that? No, we didn't do that. But the point is, ETS has been a way for us to conglomerate services in the state of Wyoming, to bring them together, and to provide some great buying power for the state of Wyoming. It has helped on our education front. For example, when we started 8 years ago, the school district with the most bandwidth connected to the state at just under 45 kilobits per second per student. Only 2 districts were connected to fiber-based broadband circuitry. Most schools were connected to the state by copper T1 circuits. Bandwidth capacities to school averaged 12 kilobits per second. And I just want you to know, I have been educated on this, because the first time I spoke at this, I said kilobytes, and I heard about it from Tony Young for like 18 months. The community colleges were connected with 45 megabit legacy copper. The state had a single internet connection on point of potential failure for the entire network. All connections were single run back to Cheyenne, which is extremely inefficient. Today, the school district with the least bandwidth, the least, is connected to the state at just under 205 kilobits per student. All districts are connected by fiber-based broadband circuitry. Only a single school was on legacy copper service in a remote area. That's Wapiti, and that's an area where we continue to work. Bandwidth capacities to the school districts have risen an average of over 4,300% in 8 years, to an average of 530 kilobits per student. All community colleges are now connected with a minimum of 1 gigabit fiber-based broadband circuits, an increase of over 2,000%. The state has multiple diverse internet connections exceeding a combined 30 G of internet access. The unified network, funded in 2014, is a triple ring backbone of 100 gigabit capabilities, resulting in multiple pathways to any core location in the state. I'm very proud of that, because when Flint Waters and Tony Young and I were working on that, what do we present to the legislature? Flint Waters said, we're going to go with 10 gigabits. And I said, that is great. But it's like buying a sports car, because then as he's leaving the office, he said, you know, and you can go 100, and we can do that someday. And it's like, you want a horsepower of 300, and then somebody says you could have 500. I'm like, we're going with 100. This is great. This is absolutely awesome. And we have done that. Milestones, 2014, the state completed all 8 of the 100 gigabit unified network circuits. 2014, which has been a wonderful program, we initiated the Global Technology Summit in Jackson, and we just had our 5th summit there this fall. 2015, all school districts are connected to the unified network. 2016, the state upgraded all schools to circuits with bandwidth capable of supporting a minimum of 200 kilobits per student, ranking Wyoming at the top of connected states by education superhighway, better than any state in the country. I think that is a cause for celebration. Since its launch, the initiative has been successful in getting Wyoming school districts to take advantage of E-rate Category 2 funding. 36 of 48 school districts have accessed the funding, and work continues to engage the remaining 12 districts this year. 2017, the state spearheaded a project to upgrade services at state locations to a minimum of 10 megabit fiber-based circuitry. Currently, all unified network circuits are being bid in preparation of future capacity needs in 2021. We've come a long ways in those 8 years, and as we look ahead, we know there's more work to continue. One that Russ is working on now is just what should be a common set of definitions that we all work with. What does it mean to be underserved or not served at all in a community? And it's, you know, people have different feelings just based upon their own personal experience. I'll just share with you the experience I had last weekend. My son, who's a freshman at the University of Wyoming, came home, and I hadn't seen him for a while, and so he said, "Dad, let's get online and play video games." I'm like, all right, this is going to be a challenge. And I was horrible, and I think it's just because I don't have good connection. I think that's why it was horrible. The point is, we need a common set of definitions of what are we working on, what does it mean? So as we have these goals, as the Broadband Advisory Council has these goals, and we say this is underserved, what does that mean? And then what does it mean to say we are fully served? What does it mean when we say that we have gigabit service to an area? Does that mean all the area, all the homes, all the businesses? So this is one of the things that the state of Wyoming needs to continue to work on. Let's get a common set of definitions so we know what we're talking about. When there's a concern from a community, hey, we just do not have adequate service, what does that mean? What should be the standard? That is one of the areas we're working on. The other area that we have worked on, and I think we need to continue to work on, and I appreciate so much the Department of Transportation's willingness to work on this the last 8 years, is when I came in and I met with many of you, I said, we are going to expand fiber. And the most common concern was rights of way. What are you going to do about that? And it wasn't I don't think it was an easy challenge, but working with the Department of Transportation and many of you in the private sector, we've come a long ways in that regard, I believe. And I mean, it's oversimplistic, but in my view, anytime we're digging a trench, we got to be looking at laying fiber. It doesn't make sense to improve a road or build a road and then come back 5 years later and dig it up just to put in conduit. We need to be very progressive at looking at that and how we can partner with the private sector to make your job as easy as possible. So as we as a state are doing these things, you all can take advantage of it. One of the areas outside of your industry that we have been working on is pre-permitting CO2 pipelines along federal right-of-ways. We think that's a great advancement for the energy companies and CO2 companies that want to transport CO2. The problem, of course, is they come in and then they have to start the permitting process, and you say, well, we may get through it in 8 years or 10 years, and then we'll kind of see what happens. So what we want to do is work with the BLM and say, we know where these corridors are, let's pre-permit them. Let's go ahead and find the areas that are the most suitable for pipelines in the state of Wyoming and get that permitting process done so when the private sector is ready to go, we can say that step has been taken care of, it provides certainty to you, it provides less money to get your pipeline into the ground. As we do that, we should also be looking at how can we get fiber in the ground along those very same corridors if it's a benefit to the private sector. So these are some of the things that we're looking on. But as we move forward with Endow in the state of Wyoming, the 20-year plan to diversify our economy. Endow is made clear, Endow Engage is made clear, the legislature is made clear, and you in the private sector know this better than any of us. In order to move our state forward, in order to diversify our economy, in order to continue to be a leader in the ways that the state of Wyoming wants to be a leader, we have to have greater connectivity. And in my mind, as I look out, there is no status quo. that's going to be acceptable. Things are always going to be changing. Capacity is always going to want greater capacity. You're always going to want greater speed. There is no limits to speed other than the speed of light. We need to continue to look at speed and capacity and move the state of Wyoming forward. But for me today, as this is my last chance to address this wonderful audience who has done so much for your customers and for the state of Wyoming, again, most importantly, it's a message of thanks. I just read recently a speech given at the Space Age Day in Wyoming. It was from 1963, given by the governor, my grandfather. And I was thinking about 1963, Wyoming's discussing space age. And here we are, sometimes in Wyoming gets stalled out by saying, you know, can we as a state move forward? We can move forward. We're the smallest state in terms of population. We know each other. I have had the ability to work with so many of you on difficult issues, whether they're legal issues, policy issues, whatever they may be. There is no destiny Wyoming cannot have if we put our heads together, if we work together. So let's continue to think in grand terms. Let's continue to recognize that if any state can control its own destiny, certainly it is wonderful Wyoming with all you wonderful people. Thank you very much.
I don't think I'm alone in wanting to do a follow-up thank you for Governor Mead. His overarching support for our industry, the focus on IT and technology for the state of Wyoming over the last 8 years has been tremendous for not only those of us at ETS, but those of us across the entire state. Governor Mead's leadership abilities and his family's focus on, and their focus and their appreciation for this state, their willingness to do everything and anything and then a little bit more goes without mention that we have a huge thank you for that. So if you would, let's one more time, huge appreciation for Governor Mead. I'm going to go ahead and assume that not unlike myself, I drew the short straw on having to facilitate today, or better yet, I didn't even get to draw a straw. I'm going to guess that Russ Elliott got the same favor in having to go right after Governor Mead. Our next topic on the agenda is Wyoming Broadband Coordination and the Future of Mapping. Russ Elliott is the new Wyoming State Broadband Manager, as Governor Mead mentioned. He brings 25 years of C-level leadership, including 12 years building and running and eventually selling Western Colorado's largest independent ISP, CLEC. Brainstorm grew from 50 customers to over 14,000 in 10 years by delivering quality telecom data and voice services. Services included fiber, copper, licensed and unlicensed wireless, delivered over the very rural parts of western Colorado and northern New Mexico. Russ sat on state boards and led regional telecommunication organizations, and thankfully we now have him. Please help me in welcoming Russ Elliott to the stage.
Hey, good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing today? Good. Welcome. It looks like we've got enough seats for everybody. That's good. So, yeah, get the lucky straw of going after the governor. And you know, he's on his 8th year and headed out. I'm on my 5th month and headed in, right? So we're blowing and going, and we're having some fun. Let me start with thank yous. And it looks like he's already exited, and Tony went with him, his little shadow. So first of all, I want to start by thanking some folks, because my job has been so much easier because I've had the opportunity to work with some amazing people. And my first thank you has to go to Colin McGee. And he's not in here because I think he's flying with the governor somewhere right now. I mean, they're already in an airplane going. You know, how'd that happen? But he helped me get started and situated. He was in here doing this role interim before I took the job, and he was just a tremendous asset for me in handing the baton over. And I got to move forward because in a rapid pace because of his handoff. I'd like to thank Tony. Tony's gone, but Tony's been fantastic. And the ETS team, you guys have done a fantastic job. Tony's been not just an institutional knowledge guy for me, but he's also been a buddy. He helped me get my rental. Funny story how that all plays out, but you know, I needed a rental in town, and I was at a place, and he knew a person, and we were having coffee, and he said, "Hang on, I'll get your rental." And he dialed up the phone, and he says, "Hey, give Russ the rental." So, hey, I got a rental, so it was good. So I got to thank Tony for that too. Obviously, the Business Council and Sean and the team, it's been a fantastic journey. It's been a job that has been very fulfilling. And I'm excited to be here, and I've got a lot of energy to put forward into this. And I continue to talk about it being legacy work, but as the governor's done his legacy work, it's now my turn. I'd like to do some legacy work in the broadband arena here in the state of Wyoming with all the amazing people that are here. I'd like to thank Cindy, her group. She's been a fantastic mentor. She's also done a great job organizing things. I wish I had half the skill set that she has in putting things together. Just fantastic. The Broadband Advisory Council. So these are my boys. This is my homies down here, right? So if you can, stand up, council members, because I want you guys to give these guys a, oh, there's a couple stragglers out there, but this is the Broadband Advisory Council. These people got seated in June, and within, you know, a very short amount of time, they've rolled their sleeves up, they put a lot of time and energy in, they created a broadband plan in 38 days. And they've got subcommittees, we're focused on all sorts of different things. These guys are a dedicated group of individuals. Doug Wilson, the chairman, wave Doug. I've been blessed to have him as a chairman, so give these guys a round of applause because they've done a heck of a lot of good work. Thank you. Where's Teal? Back in the back. Look at, everybody turn around and look at Teal. Teal, wave again. Teal Wyckoff. No, Teal Wyckoff is, she's the GIS person from Wyoming, WIGIS. And you'll see we're standing up a broadband website and mapping project today because of her efforts. Because of her efforts. So thank you, Teal. You're fantastic. We'll give you a clap afterwards, all right? We'll give you a clap when we see it. So, you know, we're not going to clap in advance. We're going to see whether or not you did good work. Kelly Cole, obviously, she's not here. She was the Utah Broadband Coordinator. She helped us write the plan. Fantastic. If you haven't seen the plan, go look at the plan. It's on the Wyoming Business Council website under the broadband heading. Troy Babbitt, I saw you this morning. Where are you at, Troy? Yep, there you are. Troy Babbitt, everybody knows Troy. Troy was doing this kind of in some form or fashion in the last few years. He's been an institutional guiding light for me and has really helped me get started as well. So thank you, Troy, for all your efforts. And finally, you're just kind of the amazing people of Wyoming. I've been overwhelmed at the generosity, the helpfulness, the hardworking, you know, very values-driven people that I've met in Wyoming. I've met a lot. I've met a lot because I'm doing a lot of outreach and a lot of county commissioner meetings, a lot of just city meetings, and a lot of just sitting down with folks. And as the governor said, I think by far the biggest asset this state has is its people. You know, I think we can talk all day long about companies and what they do great and you know, folks that are doing good work, but I'm going to tell you right now, the people of this state are amazing, and I've had the opportunity to work in some of the rural committees and you know, get involved in some of the business council extracurricular stuff, and I'll tell you, the people are amazing. It's fun. So we've had tremendous success. We're bringing focus and educating folks. We're building trust. We're setting a standard, and others are starting to take note. I've already had calls from a couple other states asking me to give talks on what we're doing because we're that far ahead, which is kind of fun. It's kind of fun to hear that. Because when I came in, the state of the state was Wyoming's not very well connected. Wyoming's not doing much in the broadband, you know, in the broadband arena. Boy, we don't have a lot of broadband. We're sure behind. That's not true. You know, what's true is we just had to get all the information together, get people organized, and now we've got a lot of people around the country saying, wow, that's take note. These guys are doing some stuff, and we're doing some really unique stuff. Other people are taking note because, I'm going to see if this works. See? There we go. I'm going to emphasize this for a minute. And if you've heard me, and many of you have, because I see a lot of friendly faces in here that I've been around talking to. But it's because we've chosen to build our effort around our mission. We, the board, the citizens, the cities, the counties, the state, the providers around the state, are all buying into our mission. Right? When I came on board, I said there's only one way we're going to go forward. We're going to go forward with a mission-driven program, not a proprietary agenda-driven program. That's an interesting thing to think about in this arena, especially because we're in the public sector. It was all new for me, this public sector. And when the mission becomes the loudest voice in the room, everybody wins. Everybody get that? When the mission becomes the loudest voice in the room, everybody wins, right? So what's our mission? Next slide, please. I'll just do this. To enrich the lives of all citizens and businesses of Wyoming. To enable economic diversification for every citizen and business of Wyoming. For Wyoming to become a leader in the digital world. By ensuring that every citizen and business has access to affordable, reliable, redundant, and future-proof broadband. I'm going to talk to that for a minute. The governor talked about definitions. One of the hardest things that I've had to do since I've been here in 5 months is try to define something. The minute you define something, somebody says why you can't define that, right? When the mission becomes the loudest voice in the room, everybody wins. So when we start to talk about definitions of affordability, we start to talk about definitions of redundancy, we start to talk about definitions of reliability. Those are scary topics for some people. But if Wyoming is to achieve being a leader in the country, we need to have some of those uncomfortable conversations. And to our credit, we're having some good collaborative conversation amongst our people. Providers, public, private, everybody. So to our credit, we're having some success. Every Wyoming citizen. This is kind of fun. Every business corridor. It makes me, I could do, I could do something like this maybe. That'd be more fun. Every business corridor, right? Has access to broadband speeds that exceed federally defined standards no later than 2023. Which at this point in time means 25 down, 3 up for the home, gig down, 100 up for the business corridors. That's the federally defined standard by 2023. Now, because we've tied it to federally defined standards, that could change, right? It could be 50 and 20. Could be 2 gigs and a gig. But right now, that's the federally defined standards, and that's our vision and mission for every citizen and every business by 2023. Part of our vision and mission is that we have added a moonshot or a BHAG. Who knows what a BHAG is? Right? No, we're not talking nasty about our wives. BHAG. I know, I had to work that one in. I told my wife I was going to say it. She's so much not. You'll know, but she thought it was funny. Anyway, BHAG is big, hairy, audacious goal. See? That's actually a good thing, right? So, what is your big, hairy, audacious goal? What is your moonshot? What is the thing that's going to drive you? What is the legacy work you're going to do? Right? We've added this to our mission. And to be honest, this is what really is driving me internally. It's to leave no Wyoming citizen behind. It's to position every business in Wyoming to compete globally. Every business. When I'm sitting in Lusk and talking to the Niobrara County Commissioners and they're telling me their biggest source of business are all the small businesses called farmers and ranchers, position every business in Wyoming to compete globally. Part of the mission. Set a standard for all others to follow by 2025. Do legacy work. Set a standard by others to follow by 2025. That, I wake up with that in my brain every day. I'm a servant leader. I love that statement. I want this state to be a leader by 2025. There's the legacy work. I want people to look at us not as, oh, that poor little state. I want them to look at us as, wow, that state that really can do something unique because their people can collaborate, because their people want to collaborate, because their people are hardworking, and it's a state that wants innovation and change and to be a leader. How do we get there? There we go. That's good. By involving passionate, knowledgeable, people who understand collaboration and are not afraid to be challenged, able to come to a consensus by maintaining a focus on our mission and not allowing proprietary agenda issues to override our mission. You've met the board. They're doing a lot of hard work. It's a great representation of this state. We've got public people, we've got private people, we've got federal guys on there. This is a good board. We have no excuses now. We have no excuses. My biggest role has been to provide clarity and sift through the perceptions that have been accepted as reality. Everybody understands that. I've said this a few times in a few of my talks. Perception is reality, right? The perception was Wyoming doesn't have broadband. The reality is Wyoming has very, very good broadband. I'm going to tell you a quick story. Representative Henderson sends me a LinkedIn post that he receives, and he says, "Hey, Russ, look at this." And it's a gentleman that's up north, and he's writing about the fact that he doesn't have good connectivity up north in a major city where one of our major players is, where I know we have very, very good connectivity. And it goes on and on in this public forum about how it's about time Wyoming does something. $10 million is a drop in the bucket. Is anybody listening? I picked up the phone, and I rang him up, and I said, "Hey, I'm listening. Tell me what you're talking about." He says, "Well, I want to do something up here in Sheridan, and I understand that we don't have any broadband." And I said, "Well, you understand wrong." I said, "You have broadband. You have fiber. You have very good fiber, as a matter of fact." "Well, I want to try to do something that's kind of high-techy." I said, "Okay, great. What do you want?" "I don't know." "How much bandwidth do you need?" "I don't know." I said, "When you know, please call me. I'm listening, but please cease and desist your posting of statements that are untrue, because in a public forum like that, that can be perceived then as reality, and it's not real. If he needed fiber in Sheridan, I know somebody who can get him fiber in Sheridan. We have plenty of bandwidth to get him fiber, so stop it. Let's stop propagating the wrong information. Let's start talking about what's true in this state, right? The stats. Here's the truth. As the governor said, we're number one in bandwidth per student. It's a pretty big deal. We need to keep talking about it. We need to say it out loud. Right? We need to say this. When I get on the phone, I'm now part of the NTIA's State Broadband Leaders Network. And I went on the phone the first day to talk to their director, and I said, "Well, here's what we're doing, here's where we are, and by the way, we're number one in connectivity to the student." And she was blown away. She's the federal person. She was blown away. She said, "Would you please present to this board of 85 next week on Wyoming and what they're doing?" I said, "Absolutely." So I got to give a talk to everybody on that network about what Wyoming's doing. And it was very, very well received. I received a number of emails and a number of phone calls following saying, "Wow, we had no clue." It's because we're not promoting. You know, a lot of the providers do a bad job of self-promoting. We've been talking about that since the beginning. I've been talking to a lot of the providers. You know, I see a couple of them smiling at me right now. You know, it's something we need to do better. We need to promote the good work that's going on. We've got a lot of fiber to a lot of municipalities. I do not have this mapped definitively yet, but I will tell you, you're going to be blown away at the amount of fiber this state has through its cities and municipalities. We're going to talk about the map here in a minute. We've got gig to the premise rolling out all over this state. You know, when the governor started to rattle off a few of those stats that he had, you know, I think we also need to take some time to recognize not just our fiber players, but our creative players, our multiple technology providers, the ones that are going to help us get to the last mile. We're going to look at being technologically agnostic. We're going to look at, you know, copper. We're going to look at wireless, and we'll look at fiber. So if we could, just for a second, because I think we didn't do a fair, just intro, can some of my wireless folks, Brett, Brian, Greg, Matt, some of you guys stand up for a second. Stand up. Anybody that's doing any kind of wireless stuff in the state. Union, you guys are doing some wireless stuff. Stand up. Anybody that's doing that kind of stuff. Patrick? Good. Barbara? These guys here are the guys that are going to help us get those hard-to-reach areas done, right? You can't take fiber to the sprinkler, right? But these guys can run good towers, good antennas, great infrastructure out there off the sprinkler heads, off the silos, off the different unique places. So I think we need to give these guys a round of applause because they've done tremendous work getting last mile stuff done in this state. Thank you. Thanks, guys. We're getting redundancy to challenging areas. We're bringing that to our attention, right? There's a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of noise about certain areas, and there wasn't a real good understanding of what redundancy meant when I came on. And so we've had some conversations about what redundancy is, and we're talking intelligently about trying to bring redundancy to areas, right? Yes, okay, good. From unserved to served, I have to talk about this just again, one more story. I'm hired, they're gracious, they bring me on, you're the broadband guy for the state of Wyoming, congratulations, here's your rental. So I go and I get in my rental, and guess who's unserved? In Cheyenne, right? So what would my perception of Cheyenne connectivity be? Yeah, my perception would be it's not very good. When in fact, we might have gig to the prim, don't we, in Cheyenne? Yeah. But at my house, I didn't have it. I was able to reach out to a very collaborative player in the state to say, boy, I'm challenged. And he said to me, let me see if I can't help you with your challenge. And in less than a week, I had 50 megs to my home. So I went from unserved to 50 megs, and he was able to pick up a new little area to deliver service to some folks. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Those people that just stood up, those are the people that are doing the things that need to get done, and they're doing it quick, right? They're doing it, they're answering the phones. We're having very good conversation around these kind of things. We've got $30 million that's been awarded to the state in CAF 2, Connect America Fund 2, which means that the feds have awarded some money to some companies to deliver broadband to these very hard-to-reach, unserved areas. And they've got a job within 6 years to get 95% build out to those areas, which is, my job's done, right? I'm finished, right? My work is through. Drop the thing that doesn't work, and I'm out, right? The truth is, there's going to still be a lot of challenging areas, and the fun thing is, we're collaborating with those folks, and we're talking about how can we help now. Because this is an area, this last mile stuff, these last, we call them pepper flakes out there in the middle of nowhere, they're going to be a challenge to reach, and it's going to take some of us with creative thought and maybe different economic models to help make that happen for every citizen of Wyoming, right? And we're having those conversations right now. Just the fact that in the stats that we've got a plan, we've got a council, we've got a grant, we've got a map, we've got a site. In 4 months, we're bringing focus, we're bringing energy, we're bringing attention, and we're starting to do some good work. Everybody's wondering about the grant, right? We've got this $10 million grant. It's sitting in the bank right now. Hopefully, we're getting really good interest. While it sits there, I came in and I looked at the administrative procedures around our grant, and the application process is going to be very onerous. And I, having gone out and met with a lot of the very small communities in this state, realized these people don't have that kind of time. Stacy in Saratoga, as I sat there with her and we talked about whether or not she could fill out a grant form, it made me sick to my stomach to think about her trying to fill out a grant form, post all the information, contact all the people that had to be contacted, and do all that, and then to end up with nothing because she didn't qualify. So I said, let's develop a pre-application, because this whole grant is contingent on whether or not you can demonstrate your area is unserved, period. So I've got a one-pager that says, demonstrate you're unserved, and then we'll talk to you, right? So that's where we're at right now. Just so everybody knows, that's the status of the grant. We will have the application complete by the end of December. We'll be probably looking at funding any kind of projects we receive sometime Q1. We'll be looking at some Q1 funding. So if you know folks out there, what was interesting is, too, that hours after I put the Wyoming Business Council put on our website that we had a pre-application in play for this $10 million, I received a phone call from a very, very big provider in this state that said to me, hey, we might be interested. how does this work, and what's the timing on it, and all that kind of stuff. So just the energy that we're creating around this stuff has been fantastic for the state. So I'm excited about that. What gets measured gets done. This was a great statement I used to use when I was working for different companies. But if you want to know how things are going, start to measure it, get a baseline, and start to determine whether or not you're moving things forward, right? I think one of the challenges, when I sat down with Governor Mead last week, we talked about, he said, well, where have we gone? Where have we come from? You know, and I said, well, unfortunately, we weren't really measuring, right? There wasn't really any kind of metric that was laid down to say, let's grow from here and let's get to another level, right? So we're going to change that. What gets measured gets done. It's time to quantify so we can measure our progress. There's 4 areas of focus in our plan right now. It's mapping, it's a public-private partnership and the funding opportunities, it's recognizing our barriers and opportunities, and it's emerging technologies. I'm not going to talk to those. I'm going to tell you right now that we have subcommittees that are addressing all of these, so they're always going to have focus. Every time we get together, the subcommittees have met, they're talking. The fun thing is emerging technologies. One of their guiding principles right now is if there's anybody out there perfecting emerging technologies in rural areas, prove your concept in Wyoming. There is no better place in the country to prove a rural concept than in Wyoming. So that's first and foremost on their agenda as far as emerging technologies is concerned. What I do want to talk about now is I'm going to talk about mapping, because that's, I think, why we're here today, to see what's going on and what are we doing with the map. We have created a site, wyobbmap.org. This is the site here. This is phase 1. I'm not going to take any critical comments around this because it's phase 1, all right? We can talk constructively around what we can do phase 2, 3, 4, and 5, but phase 1 had to be stood up in a week and a half. And phase 1 has been stood up in a week and a half with some very intelligent back-end GIS components to it. So, and again, Teal's going to drive here. I'm just going to kind of look at it. We're going to talk about it if I can see it a little bit better. But you're going to see that it's got a little bit of a why, a what, and a how right here. So there's a little intro here talking about what we want to try to accomplish, why we're trying to accomplish it, and where we're going with this information. Little contact information down there, and then ta-da, right? So the big news right now is we're going to start measuring things. What gets measured gets done. We're going to start mapping the state of Wyoming. Those of you that are in this industry understand there's a map that sits out there on the FCC website that is based on voluntary information that's given to us by providers. When Teal and I went down and met with Denver and Colorado, who are many years ahead in this space, they are having the same challenges still today. We're going to leapfrog those guys. They're still using the FCC data, right? We're going to start to get this thing down to maybe the address. We'll see. We're playing with that right now. If we can get that done, we can start to serve every citizen in Wyoming, every business in Wyoming. Back to our mission, right? What are we trying to do? So this mapping project will allow us to start to collect data. We'll start to collect data on what your services are and where they're going and where they're coming from. I understand the challenges of a mapping project. I understand the challenges of a mapping program. We're going to try to get through some of those challenges. So after the mapping down below, we're going to start to try to collect some information from folks. We're going to see if you know who your internet provider is. We're going to see if you know what your technology is. We're going to see if you know what your connection type is, what your connection speed is. What is that? We're going to see if you know what your costs are. And can we keep your information? And what else? Would you like us to keep you involved, keep you up to date? So it's going to have that information. Once you do this and you put your information in, a map will show. And this map will allow us to start to see. Can you drill down on that for me, Teal? South Africa, the Cape. Let's see what broadband they have down there. We'll be able to drill in on areas of Wyoming and have specific areas of coverage. Right? That looks like my Google Maps in downtown Denver. You're not going anywhere fast. It's all red. What you're going to see is and I'm not sure, what am I looking at there, Teal? Oh, okay. Oh, it's pretty. Anyway, can you pull out so we can just kind of see what the map looks like with flakes and stuff, so you can kind of see different colors and stuff? There you go. And can you get to the map? Can you get to the map part where you can show the different layers of the GIS? There we go. Here we go. That's what I'm looking for. The measles. Wyoming's got the measles. Now, what we're trying to do here is you'll be able to drill down by community, by anchor institution, by census block, by county. You're going to be able to overlay different types of technology, pull certain technologies off. If you want to see wireless, you can see wireless. If you want to just see fiber, you'll be able to see fiber. We're going to start to map this. Again, this is in its infancy. It's days old. I contend we're close to Colorado, and they've had 5 years. Right? So imagine what we can do when we start to collect the data. Now, the hardest part for us is going to be getting the word out so people do partake in this. And it'll be on the provider's side to get that done. I'm going to talk to county commissioners. I'll be meeting with the municipalities. We'll be doing all the things we can to continue to announce how we get it done. But you'll see the map will be very detailed. It'll have different layers. And it's already, you know, what do you got there, Teal? What are we looking at? It's got pretty colors. I guess what I'm trying to do is say, for our purposes today, we've stood this thing up in a week and a half. We're going to start to really work on this. Colorado got a substantial grant to get theirs done. We've done this, Teal and I, you know, just going back and forth, chatting. So, you know, we're being very efficient with what we have. We've got a vision to be ahead of things, not be behind or not just catch up. So you'll see this map will evolve, and it'll evolve into a tool that we'll all be able to use. Uncertain how we're going to propagate data at this point in time, but for our sake of today, I wanted you guys to see that we have a central point for information now for the state as far as broadband is concerned. On that page, we can go ahead and zoom out of the map because I'll just show them a little bit more about on the page. Now go back to the home page of the map, up top. So I think one of the things that we've had a hard time doing is coordinating our energy around broadband. So I'd like this to be kind of our coordinated energy spot, center of the universe on broadband. We've reached out to all the providers to ask them for their information, not for mapping purposes, just for information purposes. So there's a central point where people can go find a provider in the state of Wyoming. Where can I find a provider? Oh, I heard that XYZ company is in Laramie, you know, or XYZ company is up in Thermopolis. Where's XYZ? How do I contact them? We'll have a contact list of all the service providers in the state of Wyoming. We will have an FAQ page on here. And I think we've got a little bit, what is broadband? What is fiber? What is wireless? What is unlicensed wireless? What's mobile broadband? Those kind of things. This thing, I did this in about 8 minutes, so let's not give it any kind of constructive thought right now, other than the fact that we're going to have an FAQ site to where people can come and there'll be a central point for definitions and information on broadband. What I'd like to see here too is this is a collaborative effort. I'd like to see you guys chime in too. As you look at this site and you have constructive thoughts on the site, I would appreciate those things coming my way and helpful toward our mission of ensuring that we are a leader by which others will be following by 2025. Thanks, Teal. And now, back to the show. There we go. For us to achieve the moonshot, we need to think outside our traditional thinking. As the governor spoke to, one of the things that we've kind of stumbled across is what if pipelines, when they're put in, had to run a little conduit next to them? What a novel thought. I'm sitting in Lusk. I'm trying to help serve the most unserved and underserved part of this state, the whole eastern part of the state, and lo and behold, somebody shows me One Oak Pipeline. Does anybody know where the One Oak Pipeline goes? Yeah, it goes from the top of the state east side to the very bottom of the state east side. If we would have had some vision around this, We put a little conduit inside that pipe or next to that pipe, or a little part of that easement could have been communications, and we'd have been serving, we'd have had competitive offerings in the most underserved, unserved part of this state. Novel thought, right? So why don't we start to think that way going forward? And I think we're going to start talking that way. I've talked with the Pipeline Authority. I believe they are interested in hearing more and potentially embracing our thoughts around this. I think it's a good thought. We need to start to focus on what we can do and not what we can't do. Right? What can we do? What are those creative thoughts? I was just talking to some gentlemen earlier. You know, it's not just about the telecom industry. You know, what if the gas industry was talking to the telecom industry, was talking to the healthcare industry, was talking to? What can we do? Not what we can't do because I'm too busy working on my own project. It's hard to do in a state like this because it's such a small state, you know, and everybody is very focused on the little things that they're doing. But we need to come together, and hopefully we can do that. Let me make sure I've talked to everything on there. You know, the providers, that's the other thing that I got to talk to here, is that when I came in, you know, it was kind of an us and them. I really believe we're building a little bit of trust between providers and us. You know, I think that the providers are now realizing they've got a champion up here. I'm a guy that's going to sit here and say, I can't believe how much money they've actually invested. I can't believe how much energy they're investing. The time they're now investing in some uncomfortable conversations around certain areas, right? They've invested a bunch. They're coming up with innovative ways to serve. You know, we need to be technology agnostic. We need to look at all sorts of different technologies, whatever there is, whether it's, you know, Doug's a big low Earth orbit satellite guy. He thinks tomorrow, you know, Elon Musk is going to have hybrid balloon-driven cars going around up above with satellites, and we're going to be everybody's going to be served off of that, right? Whatever that is, I don't know what that technology. That's why you're the subcommittee guy. I'm not that guy. But we just got to keep an eye on all the different types of technology, and a collaborative approach can do versus what we can't do. Won't get there without you. Everybody needs to rally around the mission. So, you know, we're excited about all the energy that's gone in so far. Again, here we are. I'm going into month number 5. You know, we've done a lot of good work in the 4 months we've been here. For me, it's been a fantastic first 4 months. It's been my honeymoon with the state of Wyoming, where we've outlined a lot of plans, a lot of challenges, a lot of deliverables. I've made a lot of contacts. I've begun to build some trust with the many players across this great state. But now it's time to get work done and commit to delivering to our mission, our vision, and our moonshot. So the honeymoon is over, and it's time for us to get serious. So I've got a to-do list. You saw my props, right? If you don't know me, you're going to get to know me. So my first to-do list I've done. It's to replace this with this. All right? So we're getting serious and we're moving in. I'm trying to buy a piece of real estate today, too. And finally, I think this is just brilliant. I think this is the greatest thing ever. I'm going Christmas shopping. I'm buying all my Colorado family Christmas gifts. And I found the perfect Christmas gift for my folks in Colorado. It's Wyomingopoly. This is fantastic. I'm going to get like 10 of them, and I'm going to send them down to Colorado and let everybody have them. The future's bright. The timing's right. It's time to set a broadband standard by which others will follow. I want to thank you all for your time. I want to thank you all for your support. And most of all, I want to thank many of you for your friendship and look forward to meeting more of you in the future as we go forward. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I think Russ is now, he's now going to fulfill the role in speaking after the governor, probably at every event that comes in the future. Russ, we certainly thank you and the Broadband Council's time. Anxious to see what you guys do next. With that, we will move down with our program. Next, we have a presentation from Google. With us today, we have Stacy Pies. Stacy is a senior public policy and government relations counsel at Google. She works to drive policies that support innovation. Ms. Pies represents Google before policymakers on issues such as internet policy, broadband deployment, telecommunications regulation, and access to spectrum. So without further ado, let's welcome Stacy to the stage.
Okay, so I get to follow the governor and Russ, who's incredibly entertaining. I hope my remarks will be informative. They will not be as funny. That's for certain. So I have a few people to thank, but because I'm an outsider, I don't have that many. Certainly Governor Mead for holding this forum and enabling us to talk about these important issues. Tony Young and Cindy Delancey and everybody else involved in organizing the event. And I want to thank my colleague Greg Goebel, who convinced me that this was worthwhile and that I should come out here. And it's cold in Wyoming, so he didn't tell me that. But I really appreciate you inviting Google and giving me the opportunity to talk to you. So as you all know, because you're here, kicking off the governor's business forum with a discussion about broadband as essential infrastructure is really critical. It's critical to ensuring that the economy of the state continues to move forward, and it's critical to ensuring that everybody in all communities, whether they're rural, tribal, or urban, have access to economic opportunity and participate fully in community life. So this is my first time in Wyoming, so I did a little bit of research, a little bit of homework. I'm going to talk to you about things you all already know, but that I found really impressive. And I liked the fact that Wyoming prides itself in achieving many firsts. So we all just survived the midterm elections. Probably weighs a little heavier on me because I live in DC and I'm right in the middle of it and it's constant and nonstop. But one of the things I was most impressed about, a first that occurred during this election, was that we saw more than 100 women elected to Congress for the first time. That's both impressive and unfortunate that we're still talking about that. So I was really impressed by two firsts, the state of Wyoming. One, that you were the first state in the nation to grant women the right to vote, which tells me we should have more than 100 women in Congress, but that's neither here nor there. And that Wyoming was the first state to elect a female governor. These are really impressive firsts. And I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be pointing to you. There's my slide. You know, reflecting the fact that Wyoming is known as the equality state, and so I was pleased to learn that. And that's one of the great things about being able to travel around the country and learn more about different states. But since we're here to talk about broadband deployment, I also want to talk about the economic opportunity that's being created by the state, following what Russ talked about and what the governor talked about. And of course, in 2011, Governor Mead declared that Wyoming was the first state to go Google. So I think that's very cool. Fun picture, and I know it's been a few years, but Wyoming continues to be a great user of Google products, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in my remarks. So another first, I'm curious who in the room remembers the first time they logged on to the internet? You do? I think that's really impressive. Everybody's experience is a little bit different, and I'll share with you an early memory. Kind of dates me a little bit, but that's okay. I was working at the Federal Communications Commission, and we all were given our first federal government email address. So we had a lot of conversations about what was appropriate use of our email address. And one question that we had was whether or not we would be charged if we sent an email outside of the DC area code. Right? Seems pretty ridiculous, but in 1999, that's the way we were thinking. In 1999, as email was just taking off, we had one of the first instances of fake news on the internet. And there was actually emails and other information going around that said the US Postal Service was going to charge a 5-cent surcharge. I'm sorry, I'm not good at the pointing thing. A 5-cent surcharge on every email. That was fake news. Now, fake news is so much more damaging, but that was a first instance of fake news. And might sound crazy to some of you who kind of trying to gauge the age, the average age of the room, but some of you were probably born with an Instagram account already registered in your name. So this whole conversation about what we can and can't do with email is a bit ridiculous. And YouTube was first founded just 13 years ago. So the internet and broadband and the World Wide Web, the way that we access the internet, is pretty young. So the first YouTube video that was loaded up was loaded by the founder of YouTube, one of the founders, Jawed Karim, and it was called Me at the Zoo. No volume. There we go.
Alright, so here we are in front of the elephants. And the cool thing about these guys is that they have really, really long fronts, and that's cool. And that's pretty much all there is to say.
That's pretty much all there is to say, which we know is not true. That's the first YouTube video that was uploaded. And today we have more than 400 videos uploaded 400 hours of video uploaded every minute. So we clearly have a lot to say. And that was just the beginning. So much has changed since those early days of the internet and the World Wide Web. But the thing that we all realize and we recognize by having this event today is what a vital component broadband and the web has become for our everyday lives. And it's instrumental in our homes and our anchor institutions and our businesses and clearly our state institutions. So reflecting this tremendous growth, last week at Web Summit, which is the largest gathering of entrepreneurs, internet entrepreneurs in the world in Portugal, the founder, one of the founders of the web, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, gathered these entrepreneurs, including Google, civil society, governments from around the world, and committed to a new contract for the web, which they're calling For the Web. And I'll play this video for you. It's interesting because what it highlights is the tremendous advancements that the web has made, the opportunity it's created for people, but also some of the dangers of the web. I'll play the video.
To start a chat.
really liked this video because it highlights something that we all know and we don't always like to acknowledge, and that is, in addition to the amazing advances that access to the internet offers, that we all have a responsibility to play, and the responsibility is to protect the open web as a public good and a basic right for everyone. But in the first instance, you can't protect that right if you can't get online. So Google's mission is to put information at the fingertips of everybody in the world. And the reason why we have that mission, the reason it drives what we do at Google, is because we believe that information is empowering. That when you have access to that information, it can change people's lives for the better. But we need to get people online in order to ensure that they have that benefit. So meeting this goal means more than simply making internet connectivity universal. We seek to make it fast and seamless and affordable, and so many of the issues that we've already discussed in the short time we've been together today. And that the potential for people to experience all of the benefits of the web, that it's really critical, affordability is a really critical piece of it, because we want people to have a similar experience regardless of where they are in the world. But we recognize, and I think that we've heard already, you recognize this as well in Wyoming, that access to high-speed internet is not something that one company or one government or one technology can solve, but that it's a global effort. And we all need to be together to moving our objectives forward. And that when people have experiences on the internet, they have to be meaningful and relevant, providing access to local information and content that provides benefit to them. And it has to be democratic with a small d, so that everyone has access to this information. So with those clear goals in mind, we can all work together to achieving the goal of universally useful and accessible internet. So I'm going to share a little bit of information. I feel like the Wyoming part I'll go through fairly quickly because we've already touched on many of the points, and obviously these are things that you all know. But you're doing great things, and I'm so impressed. I have to acknowledge I wasn't aware of all of the efforts that Wyoming had made, and I had the perception that maybe Wyoming was a little bit behind. Big rural state, what could you possibly be doing? And I was incredibly impressed with all of the efforts that you've done and around the world. And third, I'll cover some of the broadband infrastructure investments that Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, and Google are making to bring us closer to the goals of universally useful and accessible internet. So first, Wyoming. The web is working for Wyoming businesses, and I am proud to say that Google is helping. In 2017, Google helped provide $218 million of economic activity for Wyoming businesses, website publishers, and nonprofits. And Google provided $598,000 worth of free advertising for Wyoming nonprofits through the Google Ad Grants program. And 2,100 Wyoming businesses, website publishers, and nonprofits benefited from using Google's advertising tools, Google Ads, and AdSense. And every year we update these economic numbers for the states around the country, and so you'll be able to see the 2018 numbers early next year. So businesses like Dave Hansen Whitewater and Scenic River Trips, based in Jackson Hole, where looking at their website, and I urge you to all take a look if you aren't familiar with the business, I got really excited. I think I'm going to plan my family summer vacation in Jackson Hole next year. They're really thriving, and they're thriving as a result of using Google tools to drive traffic to their website. They started out as a small local business. Dave Hansen started the business, and he primarily took friends and family out on river trips. But he knew that he wanted to grow the business into something that would attract people from all over the world who were coming to Wyoming. And so he did that with the help of Google tools. Using Google tools, Dave Hansen Whitewater increases the control that they have on their online storefront. They're driving traffic to their website, and they use G Suite tools to collaborate better, to work smarter, and faster and grow their business. And as they continue to grow and evolve, it will be interesting to see where their new visitors come from. And Google Analytics enables them to track that as well. So it's pretty exciting. Now, I'm going to put this slide back up again. Maybe I'll put this up like every 4 or 5 slides because I think it's really cool. As you all know, Governor Mead is a big user of Google tools, and we are very appreciative and grateful that he has embraced Google and our tools and services for what it brings to the state. So he has used Google Hangouts for his statewide broadcasts, and recognizing the efficiency and cost savings that we can bring to the state, Wyoming has become an enthusiastic user of our tools, such as Gmail and Google Maps. Same slide. As detailed by the governor, Wyoming has been a leader in removing barriers to and increasing funding for broadband deployment. And I was really impressed to see that this August, as Russ and the governor both spoke about, the Wyoming Broadband Advisory Council adopted the Wyoming Broadband Plan. And I look forward to seeing the successes of that plan to expand and improve broadband access and deployment around the state. So Wyoming is doing great things with broadband, and I'm proud to say that Google is helping. And it's exciting for me to be here to learn about these efforts by the state. Yes, you switched it, thank you. So I've already mentioned a few of the broadband tools that Wyoming businesses and people living around the state are using to expand economic growth and opportunity. But the benefits of broadband don't end with connectivity, and that's obvious. You have to have the tools to be able to make use of the broadband connectivity. So these cutting-edge technologies maximize the benefits of broadband connections. At Google, we're always inspired to see what people do when they have access to technology. And we know that people bring their passion and their energy to things that are really important to them, and that creativity is enhanced sometimes by access to technology. So we want to make sure that we do our part for the people who want the technology to bring opportunity to everyone. So we created a program, it's a nationwide program called Grow with Google. And what Grow with Google is, it's an educational platform, and it is for teachers and students and businesses and people who have not found their place in professional society yet, who want to be able to build their businesses. And we provide those tools to them through this program. So one part of Grow with Google, and this is the educational portion of it, is the applied digital skills training. And I think this is really cool, and I think it's very applicable in a state like Wyoming, where bringing tools to students so that they understand the benefits of the technology is really a critical piece. So it's a video-based curriculum. It's free. We make it a bit available to educators so that teachers can use it in their classrooms to help students practice their life skills and create projects using our Google suite of apps. So we're going to experience how one teacher in South Carolina is using applied digital skills to help her students learn valuable digital literacy skills. There are many different aspects of this program, but I really liked the one that's being used in the classrooms.
The role of schools has changed drastically because of the use of technology. It's no longer sufficient to be just a textbook and paper classroom.
Applied digital skills is like a website that you go on and it'll give you a task and work you through it using videos.
At the end of the video, it's going to have like a list. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. So you're going to do it yourself.
Employers are looking for students that have the collaboration skills that a lot of them are not coming out of high school with. This program feeds right into that need.
I thought you were like typing like milk.
Very seldom do you have a project that engages all of your students all the time. And the applied digital skills seems to do that.
We do more, mostly fun activities, like I say, dream vacation, Paris, the city of love. I really want to go there.
The video material gives me more freedom to interact one-on-one with my kids. To have that kind of relationship with them is what makes my classroom one of their favorite classes.
We can be ourselves and have fun, you know? Just like
It's teaching so many of the skills that our kids need once they leave high school or even start jobs in high school. From the critical thinking to the collaboration to organization skills, all those things are wrapped into this program. And to be able to utilize that across the board at all schools, I think would be invaluable.
So Google likes to make these videos that make me feel kind of emotional. I don't know how they make you all feel, but I love seeing how the kids really light up when they have access to the technology and they know that they're learning something that's really valuable and that's going to bring them into the workforce in a really positive way. And that is the objective of Grow with Google. Not to make me tear up, but to give people the skills that they need and the training that they need in order to be a productive part of society. So lastly, I'll share with you a few broadband access efforts that Alphabet and Google have been participating in. Google doesn't intend to be an ISP for the world, but where it makes sense, we build access infrastructure networks that can bring connectivity closer to people and bring people closer to each other. So some of these efforts include fiber projects, a little bit of what you've heard about already, such as Google Fiber and our oceanic links, and network infrastructure projects, such as edge caching and service nodes, and wireless infrastructure projects, which you've already heard a little bit about this morning. And we've got a couple wireless infrastructure projects, Loon, Google Station, and Rolling Study Halls, which I'll share with you. And in other instances, we advocate for innovative spectrum policies that enable investment by a wide range of potential users. So the way that Google approaches spectrum allocation and management issues is we argue for balanced spectrum policies. We think there are definitely situations where you have to have licensed spectrum available to ISPs, but we also really emphasize access to unlicensed and shared spectrum, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So some of these projects are US-based projects, such as Google Fiber and dynamic spectrum sharing and rolling study halls, and others are projects where we're deploying outside of the United States, especially in what we call next billion user countries in developing markets. So first, it's critical to deploy fast fiber optic networks closer and closer to end users, and you all know that. I'm not telling you anything. The reason why that's so important is it reduces costs, it reduces latency, it makes sure that users have a better experience. And in Wyoming, you have made significant progress. I was really impressed to learn about the Wyoming Unified Network, providing for the state and educational anchor institutions, and the progress that you've made there is tremendous. But after that so-called long-haul network or the middle-mile networks, we also need last-mile networks. And sometimes that's provided by fiber, and sometimes it's provided by wireless last-mile connectivity. So at Google, we have the Google Fiber business that is deploying in different communities around the country. Google Fiber uses a combination of fiber to the home and wireless last mile technology. And I think it's really important to emphasize this because you've already heard it and you'll hear it again, that getting to a gig is critical to the economic empowerment of the communities. And so we're seeing states like Wyoming, communities, cities around the country race to get to a gig. It's 1,000 megabits per second, or 10 times faster than the average speeds in the US. And Google Fiber is really happy to be part of catalyzing this innovation and investment in the area. Oh, sorry, Google Fiber. One of the other infrastructure initiatives I mentioned is what we call Google Global Cache. That's one of our peering products. Google Global Cache is a really interesting product because it is something that we make available to ISPs around the country. The caching product stores content closer to end users so that they have a better experience, and it reduces the costs for ISPs. So we provide servers that large ISPs have in their network, and then we operate the servers on their behalf. And where it's a smaller ISP and maybe traffic levels are not as high, the ISP can purchase the Google Global Cache or GGC, and then we'll operate it as if we own it. Once the ISP's traffic reaches a certain level, we can switch it out, and it can be a Google-owned cache or server if that's more economically beneficial for the ISP and a better customer experience for the consumers. So fiber is only one piece of the puzzle, and wireless is becoming a critical infrastructure all around the country because more and more of people's experience on the web is happening on mobile devices. So wireless technologies make this crucial, and while wired solutions, as you all know, are great in densely populated areas, in more sparsely populated areas, it doesn't make economic sense to lay fiber all the way to the home or to the premise. And worldwide, we've got just slightly less than half of the world's population in these kinds of rural areas where geography and topography and distance don't make it economically feasible to lay fiber. So these wireless options are some of the options. What did you say? Self-driving balloons with, yeah, Elon Musk. So we've got something a little bit like that. Not self-driving, but deployed by Google. We have Project Loon. And I understand last year or the year before you heard about Project Loon. And that Project Loon is balloon-powered internet. And it's pretty exciting. These are weather balloons that we're launching in hard-to-reach countries around the world. One example of Loon, I think we want to switch the slide. There we go. That's a photo of Loon and the launch pad in Puerto Rico, where we deployed the Loon balloons after the hurricane in 2017. In that circumstance, we partnered with AT&T and T-Mobile to serve the people of Puerto Rico who had their communication systems lost during the hurricane. And we found that this partnership was incredibly beneficial, both for the ISPs who are already on the ground, who weren't able to serve customers there, and for the consumers who then had access to basic internet services such as text messaging and access to some online information. Just a quick update, earlier this year, Loon, which is no longer called Project Loon, it is Loon, they became an independent alphabet company. What that means is they graduated. They graduated from being in the parent company, and they're operating independently, and they announced one of their first deals in Africa with Telecom Kenya, in partnership with Telecom Kenya. And so as the Loon deployments progress, they're going to be serving regions of central Kenya starting next year in 2019. And Google Station is another wireless service. We're deploying Google Station in developing markets, again, these next billion user countries around the world. And what Google Station is it's public Wi-Fi hotspots. So we started out deploying it in railway stations in India, and now we are deploying it in many public locations, malls, bus stops, city centers, cafes. And the goal, again in partnership with local ISPs, is to give people kind of a seamless access to Wi-Fi as they travel around and go about their business in some of these markets. And we're finding really great success because it's difficult in these countries. There are so many different difficult connectivity challenges, including, very importantly, the high cost of access to data. And so we're doing our part in order to bring connectivity to some of these people in these new markets.
We wake up and we start using phone instead of brushing our teeth. Nowadays, internet is a basic, we can say, right, because we are living in a society. So we want to get connected to the other people. We can transfer data, we can communicate, we can inform.
It's surprising that many people come to stations to use the Wi-Fi for educational purpose.
आमचं सॉफ्टवेअर डिझायनिंग चालू आहे तर त्यामध्ये मग जे सध्या थोडंफार वर्क बाकी होतं माझं तर ते कंप्लीट करण्यासाठी इंटरनेटची गरज पडते.
என் பையன் ஒரு ஃபிலிம் மேக்கர். நான் வைஃபை யூஸ் பண்ணி என் சன்னோட ஷார்ட் ஃபிலிம்ஸ் யூடியூப்பில் அப்லோட் பண்ணியிருப்பான்.
I can check my emails as well as I can update a status update on our social networking.
I used to see video calls to my sister.
I save articles on my phone so that when I am on commute, I can always read it offline.
I am a great fan of Batman, and when I turned on the Wi-Fi, the first notification of Justice League trailer was released. It was the happiest moment.
नेटवर्क प्रॉब्लम होती है कई बार हम कनेक्ट नहीं कर पाते नेटवर्क की वजह से. It is very useful for us.
I mean, it's as good as the internet speed that I get in my office.
So that's really empowering to the people who live in these communities who might not otherwise have access. You heard one person say that they go to the railway station to be able to work on educational initiatives. So they don't have Wi-Fi at home, probably not in their schools, but they know they can get it in these public places. And we find that very empowering. We first launched Google Station in India, and we have since expanded to Indonesia, Mexico, Thailand, and Nigeria. There we go. So I'm briefly going to touch on an issue that doesn't really tug at your heartstrings, but I think is really critically important, and that is access to spectrum. And specifically, Google is very active in advocating for access to more unlicensed and shared spectrum. And we believe that this is really critically important because when spectrum is shared, when it's available on a shared use, it is available in the marketplace much faster, at a lower cost, which enables people who might not otherwise think of themselves as purchasers of spectrum get involved in spectrum advocacy. And we saw this recently. There's a proceeding at the FCC, the Citizens Broadband Radio Service proceeding, where the FCC was looking at the size of license areas for these short-term licenses for access to this valuable mid-band spectrum. And a lot of potential companies, investors came forward, including cities, wireless ISPs, which I'm sure you have a lot of in Wyoming, companies who are deploying industrial IoT networks, entities who had not traditionally been those people who would participate in a spectrum auction. And this has become a big change in the way that we manage spectrum, the way that our country manages spectrum. It was originally believed, and at the time it was accurate, that exclusivity was the only way to protect against interference. Now that we have new technologies that can detect where people are using specific spectrum bands, we can protect incumbents, and when they're not using that spectrum, allow others to come along and use the spectrum. So things have changed really dramatically in the last few years, and we think that it's critical that balanced spectrum policies be part of our agenda, and we're hearing that more and more out of the federal government. So finally, this is my last video, I promise. I'm going to share this video with you of a program that we call Rolling Study Halls. And Rolling Study Halls is making use of this unlicensed spectrum, giving students who live in rural areas, who have long school bus commutes, access to the internet while they are on their school bus. And one of the things that we found is that students are really using this. Sometimes they play, but they're really using it to do their homework. They're using it to learn. They're using it to study. And the way that these Wi-Fi-enabled school buses have been successful is we ensure that the students have computers or devices and that there's educators on board the school buses, so they're not just on there watching YouTube videos. And we do this in partnership with COSIN, the Consortium for School Networking, and it's making a tremendous difference in people's lives. In early April, we announced an expansion of the program that started in North and South Carolina. We've expanded it to 16 rural communities across the country, and today, and this is just the beginning of the program, we're reaching nearly 4,000 students in these communities.
What I love about living here in Lenore, North Carolina, a very small town, is being able to walk over to someone's house and ask to borrow sugar, or drive down the street and see cows and animals, and they're just everywhere around here. But there's some drawbacks, I guess you could say, here. My bus ride is an hour long, and so with helping out around the house and homework and school, it's very hard sometimes.
This is Gamewell Middle School. We are located in the foothills of North Carolina. So this is a rural area. We have a significant portion of our students who do not have access to Wi-Fi or technology outside of school. And so there's always this worry that our students that don't have those resources, that they'll be behind.
With rolling study halls, Google provides Wi-Fi access on the school buses here at Gamewell Middle, along with devices and onboard educators for kids that may not have access at home.
A lot of our students have commutes that are 2 or 3 hours long with rolling study halls, and that's 2 to 3 hours a day that they have a chance to solidify what they're being taught and what they're learning in class.
Now that I have Wi-Fi on the bus, I'm able to get most of my homework done before I even step foot in the door.
The use of technology on buses gives an opportunity for all of our students to keep up. And so what we see are consistencies in learning, consistencies in growth. When students experience that amount of success, it completely changes the way they view themselves.
Having Wi-Fi on the bus has helped a lot and it has improved my grades. I went from making like a C in my high school class to an A. What I want to be in when I grow up is a lawyer, because I realized I like the idea of being able to help people. I know being a lawyer will take lots of work and lots of responsibility, but I know if I put my mind to it, I can do it.
So we think this is a really powerful program. We talk a lot about closing the homework gap. And that's really hard to do for students who don't have access to online resources. So between the Wi-Fi devices, the onboard tutors, we have calculated that we're giving the students an additional 1.5 million extra learning hours, which they probably don't want to hear. But it's powerful, and it's a great thing that we can be doing. And we're not the only company that's out there that's doing this, but we're really proud of rolling study halls. So I did a little bit of research, in addition to finding out all the firsts about Wyoming. But one of the things I was curious about was, following the midterm elections, how people view state governments versus the federal government. We all know how people view the federal government. But pollster Frank Luntz conducted a survey in advance of the midterm elections, and one of his questions was, overall, which level of government do you believe is doing a better job of serving its citizens and delivering results? And fully 71% of voters across party lines chose state governments, while just 29% chose the federal government. And this was regardless of political affiliations. This clearly demonstrated the trust that people have in their state leaders, and perhaps the lack of trust that they have in Washington. But this is no surprise to you, because those of you who are here with the government, you're close to your constituents and you can be more responsive. And there's so much that you're already doing that we've already heard about this morning to improve access to the internet here in the state, to lower barriers to deployment and adoption. But there are some policies that are federal policies and federally managed, and the spectrum policies that I briefly touched on are federal issues. So the question is, how can you make a difference? There we go. So you probably already know this, and it's not as easy as it is for me to say this, but it's really critical for you, the state government, for local industry, to be involved in what's going on at the FCC and on the Hill. Policymakers, regulators hear from folks like me all the time. I live in DC, I can come back and I can share information with them, but I don't have firsthand knowledge and expertise. And it's really critical that you bring that knowledge and that expertise to the policymakers who are making decisions. You know, we're going to see a lot of new rules adopted at the FCC because of new technology. So the 5G that I understand you're going to hear about later today, the deployment of 5G small cells is going to require a different regulatory regime. And we've already seen the FCC move quickly to adopt new rules in that space. And as I mentioned, the FCC recently rewrote rules for access to valuable high or mid-band spectrum. So this coming year and the years ahead will present increased opportunity for your engagement, and I really urge you to come and advocate for more state and local input. And I use the word input rather than control because all these rules are going to require collaboration. And the federal government's going to need to understand what it is that you're doing here in the state that's been successful, and perhaps things that haven't worked. So I just ask that you come, send letters, send emails, engage in a way to demonstrate your commitment to healing the digital divide. And some of the policies that I encourage you to engage in and to think about are making sure, and obviously you're already working on this, that the state is fiber ready. So policies like Dig Once policies, wireless ready. So this proceeding that the FCC adopted new rules for that requires fast-moving decisions on permitting for the deployment of small cells. And of course, consumer ready. And those are some of the programs that I highlighted today. What do consumers know and what do they have access to? And how are you educating them about the technology that they have available? So I've been really impressed to learn about what you've done in Wyoming, and I'll definitely come back, maybe in the summer. And sorry, I'm actually from Arizona, so even though I live in the DC area, like, cold is not good for me. But your efforts to tailor your programs to the people living in the state are really critical. And I just feel really pleased that I had the chance to come and learn about how you're investing in the future of the people who live here. And I feel really fortunate to work for a company that cares about investing in the digital future of the country. And I'm happy that I got to come and share a little bit with you today and a whole bunch of videos. So thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for listening to what Google is doing in this space. And I'm happy to answer questions, I think. Are there time for questions? Yes? So my colleague Greg should be your primary point of contact. We can discuss the various technologies we're deploying. Right now, Loon is being deployed other than Puerto Rico, outside of the United States, but we're just at the beginning. We're not at the end. And so if you can get Greg's contact information, and we can make sure that you have access to the details that you need. Yes?
Joshua Jerome with Trump County School District No. 1 in
Hi, Joshua.
And last week, I don't know if we spoke with you or one of your sisters in regards to building study halls. And with the simple, I guess, underneath how Google set it up, it has to be like a 45-minute drive to and from school. And within Wyoming, we don't necessarily have that problem, per se, but we have a different problem where our students are traveling on Fridays and Saturdays
Absolutely. So Rolling Study Halls is also a relatively new program. We just launched in North and South Carolina last year, I think, and have just expanded it this spring. And so we're trying to figure out where we can make the biggest impact. And certainly, it wasn't me that you spoke with. I have a team that is dedicated to Rolling Study Halls. And, you know, hearing your case, hearing the use case, helping the team to understand why there should be some flexibility in the policies to meet different needs of students around the country, I think is really important because we're learning as we go along. And, you know, I think the critical piece there is we don't want to be providing entertainment. Not that entertainment is bad, but that the purpose of the Rolling Study Halls program is for the students to be able to do homework. And so understanding how they might be able to use the program to do homework, to catch up. I know, you know, students are traveling all of the time, and a lot of homework is done on the weekends. And so giving them additional hours to be able to do that, I think is important. But, you know how to make that case and share it with the team. And if you already have contacts, then I would continue to use them. Yes?
Encouraging internet access, and I know your fiber project was a big part of that. You were really rolling that quite a while, but as you said, you didn't want to become an internet service provider. But I think you encouraged a lot of the big providers to look at gigabit service, and I applaud Google for doing that. My question is having to do with municipal Wi-Fi. Is Google taking a position? It's become a controversial issue lately. Chairman Pai from the FCC made some very discouraging statements recently against municipal Wi-Fi, and yet for a lot of communities, that's probably a great way to provide internet access to a lot of communities. What's Google's position on that?
Is there any press in the room? Okay. So Google has argued from the beginning of the Google Fiber project that grew into a full-fledged business that communities need every tool in the toolkit. Google Fiber isn't going to go to every community. The service providers who are here in this room are not going to go to every community. We all just can't for economic reasons, geography, topography. There has to be different technologies serving different communities, and that communities know what's best for the community. So a lot of what we've advocated for over the years is public-private partnerships. So whether it's fiber, whether it's Wi-Fi, where you've got the private sector in partnership with the community, in partnership with the local government, ensuring that local governments can get broadband to the people who live there is really the most important thing for us. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Stacy. All too often, it's easy to focus on the negative in the world, and so I, for one, while seeing some of those videos, like seeing that there's a lot of positive. Not only what we're trying to accomplish in the state of Wyoming, but it is kind of comforting to see that the fight continues on a global level. So with that said, we certainly applaud everyone's efforts. It's nice to see that technology is hitting us in ways that we never thought possible before. I'll be anxious to see what happens tomorrow. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and go to break just a little bit early. We will convene again at 11 o'clock with our next speaker. For now, please take advantage of this time to network, and I believe there are some vendor booths out the door to the left, and we'll see you at 11. All right. If we could ask you to please take your seats, we'll continue with our program. If you could please take your seats, we're going to try and continue with our program. Stay on schedule if we can. Lunch will be canceled here shortly. I don't think I still do, no. If I can, again, please take your seats. We would very much like to continue with our program as scheduled. Thank you. Certainly appreciate the networking breaks as it's an opportunity to visit. But with that said, we're just a few minutes behind. We're going to go ahead and continue. Up next, we have our current state of telehealth in Wyoming. And with us today is Dr. James Bush, MD, FACP. I'm not going to begin to know the acronyms of the health world, as it's probably not much different than the IT world. Dr. Bush is the chairman of the Wyoming Telehealth Consortium and oversees the state of Wyoming's telehealth contract. He joined the Wyoming Department of Health in March of 2007 as the staff physician and Medicaid medical director. In this role, he oversees the health management and utilization management contract and provides clinical oversight throughout the Department of Health. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bush to the stage.
Thank you all very much. It's a real honor to address you all, and I want to give particular thanks to Governor Mead for his support of telehealth and for broadband. If it wasn't for the expansion of broadband in the state of Wyoming, telehealth would not be in as good a shape as it is today. And I'm very pleased to say that Wyoming currently has one of the most advanced telehealth networks in this country, and it's all been made possible by the advances of broadband. So I normally address physician groups, healthcare groups, but I thought because you are the people who make this possible, who make the expansion of broadband, I thought you'd like to understand a little more about telehealth and how we are using the capacity you gave us. It was widely discussed in the last gubernatorial election as very important for the health of our citizens, so I'm sure that Governor-elect Gordon will be continuing the support for telehealth that Governor Mead has given us. But not many people really understand what is telehealth and all of its elements and capabilities. I thought you'd like to see what your efforts have made possible. And I would like to give you a very broad overview of all the elements of telehealth. There are no cat videos. And then Dr. Lisa Finkelstein, who is our current president of the Wyoming Medical Society, she is also joining us via our telehealth platform, Zoom. And she will speak to you about the future of what telehealth is, and we hope to leave time for questions. So now let's see if this works. Do I have to point it somewhere in particular? Well, how's it? How about we just have the promoter or the technical support in the background advance me? Should be, what is telehealth? Yes, there you go. So telehealth is the use of technology to deliver health care, health information, or health education at a distance. Common applications include both clinical, which is the ones that most people think about, patient visits or consultations, or store and forward consultation from one provider to another, say via pictures, lab results, etc. But there's also a very important non-clinical element that people forget about, including provider training, administrative meetings, and public health. Wyoming has always been very supportive of telehealth, and including it has a legislative history. I notice we have several senators and representatives here, but I don't know how many were in the Senate and House. Back when the legislature created a legal platform for a Wyoming Telehealth Consortium to include, at that time it was the Office of the Chief Information Officer, various state agencies and private health organizations to facilitate the operations of a statewide interoperable system using existing infrastructure. The members were appointed by the Director of the Department of Health, And you can see that it's had a very broad mandate to promote, encourage the use of telehealth around the state of Wyoming. And the Wyoming Telehealth Consortium continues a very robust existence at this point in time. And actually, I think we went one slide over. There we go. There was a series of vendors who have been helping us with our telehealth consortium over the course of the years. So as you go through the history, you'll see a variety of names, and that can be confusing to people. The initial contract was with Cheyenne Regional Medical Center, and after reprocurement, we had Ptolemy up in Sheridan. Our current vendor is the University of Wyoming Institute for Disabilities, also known as WIND, and they are the ones who are currently helping us with set up the Wyoming Telehealth Network, which is separate from the Wyoming Telehealth Consortium, but they've been a very good partner. So if you go to our current Wyoming Telehealth Network webpage, you'll see we have information that is available for patients and just figure out the right spot. Can you just advance them when I point at you? That will make life a lot easier. We also have a great number of resources for our providers, including what is telehealth, various webinars that we've filmed, education and training around the provision of telehealth, how providers can enroll in as a telehealth provider, minutes of our consortium, list again of all the telehealth providers in the state, various resources to help people set up and to develop telehealth. Next slide. Currently, we are using enterprise license for a HIPAA-compliant Zoom. HIPAA, you don't need to know more than it's all about privacy. Patient privacy is extremely important. And if you just use the free Zoom or the free applications for telehealth, you are not in a HIPAA compliant. Our platform is encrypted on both ends, whatever that means. It means it's very safe. And, but if you just Skype with a free Skype with a provider, you are not protecting your privacy. What this does now, and what is we are so excited about, because we moved from an old bridge when it became, went through its shelf life. Now anyone with just a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop computer, as long as they have internet access, they can have HIPAA compliant medical services. And Wyoming already had these licenses. So when we got the contract with the University of Wyoming, it just made life very simple. And I think the legislature always likes us to be very cost efficient. And so we didn't have to go out and re-procure for that. So it's a real win-win. And now we make these licenses available to any provider at no cost. Next slide. Medicaid has also expanded the number of provider types that can do telehealth. Basically now any enrolled Wyoming Medicaid provider can, if appropriate, bill for telehealth. And that is something we've continued to expand as we see more and more use. So you can have telephysical therapy, telespeech therapy. Again, not everything, anything that requires hands-on obviously can't be, but when you're doing evaluations, when you're doing follow-ups, when you're supporting sessions, we have one ear, nose, and throat doctor in Denver who is now currently reprogramming cochlear implants via telehealth. So I mean, the sky's the limit. Because it is the provider's license on the line, anything that they feel comfortable can be appropriately provided via telehealth, they can, and we will pay for it. All the insurers have parity. We do not have a parity law, but really one's not needed. Other states, they were trying to pay 20% less, 30% less for telehealth. In Wyoming, we are able to convince all the payers to pay at full parity. Medicaid, I'm also very proud to say, we have now made, I think we are the first payer that we will pay for telehealth visits from the patient's home. They don't need to go to a doctor's office anymore. And so if you're doing follow-ups and the patient is on the other side of a mountain pass, that patient can stay at home and you can still see the patient and bill for a full office code the same as if they had come all the way to your office. So that's really important given the wide spaces and rough winter conditions in the state of Wyoming. If they are at an enrolled site like a doctor's office or a nursing home, that facility can also bill an encounter fee, an originating site fee. So that's not much, it's an extra $25, but it recognizes that it takes some of the resources for those providers. And we have various codes, and I know you all don't want to know about medical coding. Next slide. What is extremely important to us, though, especially in state government with our oversight role, is the standards of care. There at the beginning, it was just the Wild West. And the Board of Pharmacy actually came to us with a case where a commercial teledoc outfit had sent in a prescription for a client, and they knew that there was a contraindication for that medication. They couldn't get the doctor's name. They did not know the doctor's license. He was not licensed in the state of Wyoming, and there was no way to reach him. So it was very important to us in our oversight capacity that we established the standards of care, and I basically convened the boards of medicine, nursing, and pharmacy. We brought in the insurance commissioner's office along with the state employees insurance, and we developed a uniform policy for the appropriate use of telehealth and the delivery of health care. This was adopted by all three boards. So anyone who is practicing telehealth in the state of Wyoming has to have a Wyoming license. They have the same medical standards as if they were in person. If you try to lower your standards, you are in violation of the boards and can be penalized by the board. If you are trying to practice telehealth in the state of Wyoming without a Wyoming license, that is a criminal offense. And I've known physicians, one physician was practicing medicine via telehealth in California, and he had a Colorado license. He got pulled over for a speeding ticket, and they arrested him because he had been practicing without a license in the state of California. It is really important that everyone understand that if you're going to practice medicine in Wyoming, you have a Wyoming medical license, and that is to protect you all, the patients. Next slide. Another thing where people get confused about is the difference between licensing and credentialing. Everyone needs a Wyoming license to practice medicine in the state of Wyoming, but that is not the same as credentialing. And so if you want to do telestroke, teleheart attacks, if you want to provide care via telehealth in a hospital setting, you've got to be credentialed by that hospital, and that doesn't give you full scope. When I was credentialed at Poudre Valley Hospital in Fort Collins, I had internal medicine privileges. I had certain things I could do and certain things I couldn't do. And that becomes one of the barriers when you're talking about hospital groups. Another important part is many of the hospital boards could make it easier to credential physicians, because credentialing is a very complicated, time-consuming business, because they go back all through your paperwork all the way back to medical school. And it takes a lot of time and money and effort. And so it reduces the incentive for physicians to want to provide services around the state. What you can do, however, is if the hospital board adopts something called deemed credentialing allows them, if you got, say, if you are credentialed at St. John's Hospital up in Jackson, and you want to provide telehealth services in other hospitals around the state, if they have adopted deemed credentialing, you can be credentialed without having to go through the entire hassle every time. So that's something, and we have template for deemed credentialing that can be used by any of the hospital boards around the state of Wyoming. And that would make it easier for specialty care to be provided, keeping the patients in towns like Lusk, et cetera. So next slide. So what are the current uses of telehealth? Well, most people are pretty aware of primary care, and they're used to high blood pressure follow-ups, ear infections, urinary tract infections, et cetera. But you can provide specialist care, and Dr. Finkelstein is a urologist who loves to provide telehealth as well. We have neurologists who are providing telestroke care and consultations in neurology. We have genetics clinics with the University of Utah, where instead of having to fly them to work with the Barbara Davis Center, in Denver for the children who are using insulin pumps. And so the kids do not have to drive down to Denver for follow-up care. So that's very important. We now have 2 urgent care providers who are groups of emergency room physicians who are providing urgent care in the state of Wyoming. One group is in Colorado, but they have Wyoming licenses. And they've made agreements with us that if they see a patient in their urgent care telehealth visits, they will pull what we call the continuity of care document, so they see the medical history, and they will refer the patients back to their primary care physician. So that, I think, is a real groundbreaker. There's a lot of psychiatric services being performed in the state of Wyoming, and I have some slides about that coming up. Echo clinics are a form of long-distance education for providers, and this was developed by a doctor down in New Mexico. And we now have echo clinics in HIV, hepatitis C, chronic pain, general psychiatry. And our University of Wyoming actually is one of the world hubs for echo clinics. So we have real expertise in echo clinics. And that's thanks to their good quality. We do training for public health nurses. We've trained waiver providers. So that educational component is something that's you all don't see as much, but it's very important to the state of Wyoming. We are now also, I just heard that Cheyenne Regional Medical Center is now doing remote patient monitoring. And that is just a brand new program. And I think it's really exciting because that way you can reduce readmission rates. If you can see that their weight is going up or their blood pressure is going down, you can make adjustments on the fly. So, next slide. It's no surprise to people that the state of Wyoming has severe shortages. The entire state is a mental health professional shortage area. Child psychiatry was especially acute. So I think at the moment we still have less than 5 child psychiatrists in the entire state of Wyoming. And we just could not service these children appropriately. We were under 30 general psychiatrists in the state of Wyoming, and I think it's gone down. I think we're about 25 now. So we had a crisis going on that we couldn't provide the necessary medical care to these people. So next slide is one example of how we address this. We developed a program with University of Washington, which is Wyoming's medical school. We're a WWAMI state, so our kids go in-state tuition to Washington. And so we worked with their child psychiatry department to provide telepsychiatry consultations for children who are getting ready to go in front of a judge for a multidisciplinary team hearing, which is where they would take the children and say, do we need to take them into state custody and put them in psychiatric residential treatment facilities? There has been no child psychiatrist had seen these kids, and they're in front of a judge, and they were throwing up their hands and going, what shall we do? And I thought there were too many, because once you put the kid in there, then they, of course, destabilize even more. And so I worked with Edie Troutwine, who at that point in time was with the Guardians ad litem, and I said, why don't we get a child psychiatry consultation done with these children before they go in front of the judge? And I talked to our psychiatrists at our Psychiatric Association meeting, and they said, we don't have the time to get these in a timely fashion. So I went to Washington, we signed a contract with them, they all got Wyoming licenses, which more than doubled the number of child psychiatrists in the state of Wyoming. And we were able to reduce the number of admissions to psychiatric residential treatment facilities by over 50%. And the lengths of stays have been shortening. So this is really good because they were able to recommend what they thought was wrong with the child and could they direct them to appropriate services in their own community. So we had better access, avoided expensive placement, and we've saved a lot of money. Next slide talks about some of the current programs. So it's just not the state. We have our Wyoming Telehealth Network, which is a state-run facility. And to me, this is very much like the way we use state dollars to build the highway system. We build the roads, but we don't tell people what car they have to drive, where they can drive. It's open, and that allows for a free market. Cheyenne Regional has a very long-standing telehealth system, predated ours, in fact. And they have a booth here as well, so I encourage you to go take a look at it and see what they're doing. Like I said, they just unrolled their home monitoring programs as well. And it's a very collaborative relationship we have with CRMC. Wyoming Medical Center up in Casper is just now beginning to unveil their own telehealth program, and that's great too. And they've been working very collaboratively with the Wyoming Telehealth Consortium. We have a nursing home in Pinedale that I'm trying to promote more use of telehealth in nursing facilities. Because what happens is when the patient has a change of condition, they get put in an ambulance, carted off to the emergency room. They don't have their current meds. They don't know why the nurses were worried. They run every test under the sun, which Medicaid pays for, and then they send them back, most of the time, back to the nursing facility. And it's uncomfortable for the patients, it's inefficient, and it's way too expensive. So Pinedale, which doesn't even have a local emergency room, so they have to ship them 60, 100 miles to the emergency room. They've agreed that they're going to start using telehealth in their nursing facility, where they can just roll the laptop up into the patient's bedside, have the nurse there with the current med list, talk to the emergency room physician or their medical director, and keep the patient in the nursing facility unless admission is appropriate. Avera is another hospital system out of South Dakota that's helped us by promoting, several hospitals have tele-emergency room, tele-ICU, and tele-pharmacy. And so they have physicians in Sioux Falls who, when a patient comes in and they punch the button on the wall, they're connected via monitor to those physicians. We do have the out-of-state commercial programs, the teledocs, the things like that. We are trying to encourage our physicians to promote their own in-state systems. The teledocs and the things like that, they're pretty good for the very, very simple programs, but they don't coordinate with the primary care physician. They don't check the med list. The quality varies because, again, we're not doing any screening. And again, they have to have a Wyoming license, and we don't know that they always do. So I'm trying to develop a more robust in-state system of telehealth, and with selected partners from out of state who we are sure of their quality. And then, of course, we have our out-of-state healthcare systems, UC, St. Vincent's, Billings Clinic, HCA, and they also run. So when we have statistics, there's a lot of misinformation, and this is a survey we did just a few years ago, and they were still concerned about medical reimbursement, even though we have full parity with telehealth. Lack of technical staff. Well, anyone who can accept an invitation on a Zoom invite, that's about as technical as you need, and we still do have University of Wyoming staff who are available to help train and troubleshoot. Corey was just here today and helped us to set up our Zoom meeting with Dr. Finkelstein. Training. I don't know how many of you all got into the equipment side, but the old original Tandbergs, you know, you almost had to have a Scotty at the controls to keep the face from eating out and freeze. People had to buy the big Tandberg systems. They were thousands of dollars. Now, you can use your phone. I think Dr. Finkelstein's on her iPad. If you got a laptop with a built-in camera, as long as you have internet access, you can do it. I think the biggest one is the medical staff resistance. Doctors, we are a very conservative bunch in many ways, and we just don't like change. And it's just a lot easier to say, I've always just told them, I want you to go, and I want you to go to see this specialist. And it's a lot easier to say, I don't care if you have to drive all day to see me. I'm very happy to have you spend all day coming to see me. And so until the patients really start demanding telehealth services, we have a lot of true believers who have shown that telehealth is very easy to perform. It's just as good as in person. And so our true believers are already using it extensively in the state. But we got a lot of people who inertia and lack of patient demand, they don't want to do that. So those are some of our barriers. How about patient satisfaction? So at one point, one of our psychiatric providers, HealthLink Now, they did a survey, and over a quarter of the people had to drive 100 miles, over 100 miles, to see a psychiatrist in person. That is a very big inconvenience. So, of course, they tend not to go see their specialist very often. The next slide says, were you comfortable with your visit? I think in person you don't get that high satisfaction rates. I mean, that's amazingly high satisfaction rates. The next slide shows, would you prefer to see a psychiatrist in person or via video? And the overwhelming majority said, I prefer video to in person. And for a lot of small town Wyoming, think about it. You know, if they say, isn't that John's pickup in front of the shrink? Yeah. This way they can see their psychiatrist from home. And still, you know, what the Department of Health is currently doing is providing the free HIPAA-compliant access to telehealth software to providers, currently through our Zoom platform, offering distance learning for providers via Zoom. We are reimbursing providers at the same rate for both telehealth and in-person medical visits. We are doing other services around the Department of Health, including public health nurse training, follow-up appointments for our genetics clinic, and behavioral health service through our community mental health clinics. We're doing multidisciplinary team meetings, psychiatric residential treatment facility reviews, child psychiatry with Seattle Children's. They also help us with any provider who has seen any child in the state of Wyoming and has any question from 9 to 6 Mountain Time can pick up the phone and talk to a child-trained, board-certified child and adolescent psychiatrist. That child doesn't even need to be a Medicaid client because this is how we educate our providers. So as part of an educational mandate, so if you've got a kid on Blue Cross or uninsured, you can still talk to a child and adolescent psychiatrist at your convenience, on your schedule, and get a written report back on that. It's called the Provider Assistance Line, and it's a great service. It really is good for the docs of the state of Wyoming. Next slide just shows a few of our numbers and the growth over the years. And this, again, is just for our network. And remember, there were all those other networks we talked about. So for state fiscal year 2018, we were up to just under 1,000 clinical providing telehealth, and about 3,700 mental health, non-Medicaid encounters. So as we're going forward, next capacity in the state. And again, this was I also want to thank you guys for helping to increase broadband capacity, but we can't stop. Because as more and more providers come online and we're using finer and finer resolutions, like with our MRIs, et cetera, the broadband capacity's got to keep up. And so you got to keep doing this so we can keep providing the clinical services. We have to find ways to overcome the provider resistance. So I encourage you all to start thinking about talking to your physicians next time you're in there and saying, why aren't you doing telehealth? Or have you considered doing telehealth? It's so simple. Nothing special is required. And they can just go into their office instead of the exam room, open their computer, accept the invitation, and they're connected to their patient. Corporate resistance. You wouldn't think that would be a big issue because on the whole it saves money. But when you start talking about large systems, like a certain university system that's just south of the border, they're a more complex organization than the state of Wyoming. And I've been talking to them for years, and they keep saying, yeah, sure, we'd like to. And somehow it just never comes across. You know, you can't get high enough in the food chain to get to the decision makers. So that's something we're working with, and, you know, I think it'd be really good if one of the things I've talked with our medical society about is talking to the other medical societies, and can Colorado Medical Society and Utah Medical Society and the Wyoming Medical Society go to their legislatures and say, let's work on building regional telehealth for the state, for all of our states benefit, because all these states have people going across state lines. And wouldn't do for Wyoming to say to Colorado, oh, you know, you need to connect your system to us. I don't think Colorado would like that. And then finally, what specific problems should the state attempt to address through telehealth? I mean, what's the role of the state versus the role of the hospitals versus the organizations? And so this is something we're very cognizant of. But again, I go back to our original vision of this is a means of communication just like the highway system. And it was appropriate to use state dollars and state resources to start building this. And now as people are starting to drive on them, what do we see our role going forward into the future? And I think that's something that Dr. Finkelstein will be wanting to talk about. And so our next slide just has her name up, President, and I think she's going to switch over and talk to you a bit about the future, and then we'll have left time for questions. It's all yours, Dr. Finkelstein. Can she hear us?
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yeah, we hear you now.
You can hear me. Okay. All right, I'm going to be reading a little bit, but I want to say hello to everybody. I'm sitting in an exam room in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, in my urology exam room. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm not cutting out?
Nope.
If I do during the presentation, somebody jump up and down, Sheila, and let me know. So I'm on Zoom right now. This is our HIPAA compliant platform that Dr. Bush was talking about, and I want to give a shout out to Dr. Bush for making this happen, because this is a huge advantage for the state of Wyoming. It's hard to make telehealth sexy. All of these boring facts. However, it's just so exciting that we have a free HIPAA compliant platform that any physician can use. And it's really important that we get the word out, and that's what we're trying to do. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a presentation on telehealth from my perspective as a physician. So let me just start by saying that my name is Lisa Finkelstein, and I practice urology in Jackson, and I've been here for 15 years. Currently, I'm the president of the Wyoming Medical State Society. When I arrived in Jackson, I came from the suburbs of Michigan. And I was still on a treadmill going to 5 different hospitals, 4 different offices, running like a chicken, basically. It took me a while to figure out how to slow down and take a deep breath. I can say now that I understand the challenges that Wyoming physicians and patients face getting medical care in this rural state. I'm going to start with a personal story and my perspective as a doctor and my experience of patient-doctor access in this large state of only 500,000 people. So for about 12 years, I flew on a King Air twin-engine plane to a rural clinic and drove 75 miles each way to another clinic in Pinedale. I would take my nurse and another assistant. I remember my last flight very clearly. The pilots informed us that we could not land in Jackson due to weather. There was a snowstorm and there was poor visibility. We had to land in Idaho Falls. It was dark. The spine surgeon who also flew with me had to call his neuromonitoring friend who lived in IF, who kindly drove us over Teton Pass into the Jackson Airport, where our cars were parked under a couple feet of snow. He also had his PA and another assistant who helped him. All of us were married and all of us have kids. It was 11 p.m. and the spine surgeon was first out of the Suburban because, of course, he was in a hurry. He had a case at 7 a.m. the next morning. He slipped on the black ice and dislocated his shoulder. Screaming in pain, I decided that was my last flight. The Pinedale Clinic was one of my favorite places to see patients, but that came to an end for many reasons. I could see the writing on the wall. The clinic struggled to keep doctors for any length of time. They were tired, burned out from call, having to do everything from answering the phone, opening the doors in the middle of the night, and never know what was coming in. There are big problems in Wyoming. As all of you know, retention of providers, access for patients, endless hours of driving, fires, blizzards, and on and on. Telehealth can help us. It can help all of us. At some point, all of us are patients. The time is right now for this concept of telehealth. Let me briefly stop and give you a couple definitions. Dr. Bush touched on this. So telemedicine is what I relate to the most. And that's because it means direct patient care using telecommunication. Telehealth is a broader term that incorporates telemedicine, but also indirect healthcare services like education, consultation between providers, and all other potential services. We have to make telehealth a priority in this state. We need reliable internet connection, hardware devices, microphone and camera, plus secure software to protect our personal health information. Many of the barriers are coming down. It's taken about 15 years or more, but the energy is palpable. Connectivity is so much better, but it's still an issue. I tried to use telehealth in 2011 with the Pinedale Clinic. There were so many firewalls and glitches that we gave up. But we are trying again right as we speak. All around the state, pockets of providers and educators are giving it a go. Psychiatrists and therapists have been using it for many years. However, if we are to make telehealth a priority, we have to get more buy-in. The patients are easy. It takes about a half a second to get them to say, I'm in. You mean I don't have to miss work, drive 3 hours for 15 minutes? You mean I don't have to find childcare, or even better, my child can stay at home and see the doctor using my iPad or my device? I'm going to give you one quick example of a patient. That is true, and not every visit is geared for telemedicine. But this example is a patient who lives in Du Bois. She has MS, multiple sclerosis. She's in her early 50s. She's had MS for about 20 years. Her gynecologist recognized that something was going wrong with her urinary tract and asked me to see her while she was doing a minor surgical procedure in Jackson. Well, it turns out not only can't she walk, she can't pee. So I taught her how to intermittently catheterize herself, as many MS patients have to do. And I said to her, would you be willing to have your next visit on follow-up go to the Sage West Clinic in Du Bois? We're set up to do telehealth, and we can do your follow-up visit using telehealth. And I explained to her how this, I didn't even have to get the words out of my mouth. Within about 3 seconds, she was like, I'm in, this is so exciting, let's do it, I don't have a car, and on and on and on. There are countless examples of things that we can do where we don't actually have to physically examine a patient. Or even if we do have to examine a patient, it could be done in such a way at a clinic where we have a nurse or a PA help the physician at a distance, and they can be our hands. So there's a lot of ways that we can figure this out. The doctors are not so easy to get to buy in. And that's because they have to do the work to figure out telehealth. And they, of course, they ask, am I going to get paid? And am I going to get sued? All of this really is the practice of medicine. It's just a different way. So the doctors are very leery about trying another thing that they have to figure out. But as Dr. Bush said, that it's easy. We just have to get them to see that. We've made great strides, thanks to many people working in the background for this concept to work. We have to advertise, advocate, and educate for telehealth in Wyoming. There is great opportunity for us to be organized and strong around telehealth. We are moving from being an adolescent to an adult. The border states and big businesses are already looking at Wyoming as a place to try out their new innovations. If we don't respond now, Wyoming will lose the opportunity to control its own telehealth destiny. I'm not saying that this is bad, but we will continue to lose countless patient visits and hours of wasted time in cars away from work and families, getting to places for a short encounter. It can happen. We can do this. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about telehealth in Wyoming. And we may have a little bit of time for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Finkelstein. We welcome all questions, but I've been asked if you would wait for the microphone because Dr. Finkelstein can only hear what's going through the microphones. Yes, sir. Yeah, he's on his way.
So thank you. My name's Albert Summers. Dr. Finkelstein, I think you know me.
Yes, I can see the back of your head, I think.
Yeah, it's the bald head up front. So my question is, and I served on an opioid addiction task force, and it was really abundantly clear that we don't have enough mental health and substance abuse treatment options in the state of Wyoming. And so my question to you is, how can the state make this telehealth better? Is there a way that we can reduce barriers? What can we do as a state to ensure this happens and to ensure that we can get particularly more mental health providers in the state of Wyoming through telehealth? Because that, I think, is our biggest hole, particularly in rural Wyoming.
Well, honestly, I think that much of the work has been done. And it seems to be that by the government, the state government, the governor, the legislators saying out loud, very loudly, that we want to make telehealth a priority in this state, rather than keeping it sort of this organic, smoldering little groundswell that's taken so long. In order to really push it forward, we have to actually start talking about it. So that's really a major, I think, one of the major impacts that the state can make is by getting the word out, getting the buy-in. Of course, you know, finding providers that actually can provide these specific services is difficult because we're lacking a lot of these specialists in Wyoming. And frankly, you know, across the state, psychiatrists, there's pockets of specialists that every state suffer from. You know, this is not just a Wyoming problem, but a national problem. So I think advertising, educating is, to me, one of the biggest priority, getting the word out. Other things like connectivity and broadband and making sure that we have that in place is also going to be a major continuing project. The licensing has, you know, all those barriers are coming down. The insurances are mostly paying. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. It's just I encourage you as an association and the Department of Health, of course, as you see barriers or you see opportunities where the state can step in, I think it's important that you articulate those to us so we can keep moving this ball forward.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. As a state employee, we are routinely told we cannot lobby for anything, but we can answer questions. And since you asked a question, I'll give you my 2 cents worth. One of the biggest barriers we've had has been we've had a very small budget, just enough to support the contract, and we've had no money to promote. We've tried to promote this around the state, and as Dr. Finkelstein said, I think if we could raise the public awareness, one of the things I'm trying to do is to shift from just trying to convince doctors to offer telehealth, is to get the patients to say, we know there's telehealth available in the state. And you may have heard, we actually just did 2 public radio spots. One was geared towards doctors and one was geared toward patients, saying, we got a telehealth network. And again, in my opinion, I think we have one of the finest telehealth networks in the country right now. It's getting the doctors to use it and getting the patients to know it's there so they can ask for it. And so I think some governmental support for some promotions of that. I know normally we get nervous about doctors or state departments advertising, but it's not really the State Department per se. We're trying to build the system for our providers. And I think that, to me, would be the biggest element. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have a wonderful telehealth system, and our partners at University of Wyoming, CRMC, Wyoming Medical Center, they're moving the ball forward, as Dr. Finkelstein says. We just need to raise the profile.
It's almost like campaigning, you know, when you're on a campaign and you're knocking on doors and you're knocking on everyone's door and you're saying, you know, this is what I believe in. This is, you know, this is my stance. We need to have that ability, boots on the ground, to get out there and let people know that this is out there and to let physicians know how it works. And I think the state can help us with that. They can maybe incentivize physicians. You know, we are organized, but it's a very small group of very dedicated people like Dr. Bush and Corey Jenkins and Kevin Smith, and a pocket of physicians that are actively, mostly, you know, utilizing the telehealth. So the state can help with some funding in regards to figuring out what are the priorities for Wyoming, what are the priorities for each different county and area, because not every place has the same priority and needs. So organization is also going to be important.
Other questions? Yeah, we got one over there.
Yes, hello. I'm glad you were able to join us. I'm curious, of the tactics that do seem to work for bringing providers into the fold and showing them how this program works, what do you find are the most successful?
Well, I'll take the first stab at that one. One of our true early champions was Dr. Dean Bartholomew when he was in Saratoga. That was a one doctor office, and he had one staff person who became the telehealth expert. He reached out to the specialists and says, I want you to see my clients via telehealth. And they would come into his clinic, they would call the infectious disease doctor or the cardiologist or the neurologist, and one was in Casper and one was in Cheyenne. And he also could reach out to Seattle for the Seattle Children's Consults. And they had a room that was just set up with good acoustics, good sound, and he was a great champion and did a lot of telehealth. So you don't need a big clinic. Even the smallest clinics can do that. But I think having someone who is comfortable with it and goes through the mechanics And that was even back in the days when we had a bridge. Now with Zoom, you just send out an invitation to the other site, whether it be the patient's home or the cardiologist or the infectious disease doctor, and you're connected. So it really is that easy now. So, but I think just making the commitment to it is the primary part. And I think a lot of them just don't believe it's as easy as it is. Dr. Finkelstein, you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I would just like to say, you know, let's look even further ahead than that. So right now, the model is that the insurance companies are really trying very hard to keep telemedicine with a high standard, meaning like we want to try to replicate as much as possible this as what you could do, as much as you could do from an in-person physician-patient relationship. But the reality is that what patients really want is the convenience of being able to do it out of their home, and not necessarily have to drive to a clinic, sit in a, be roomed by a nurse, have to go through a lot of things. There are advances that we can use with apps on your phone where we can take vitals in your home. We can do things. Patients are very, very smart and very capable of doing a lot of stuff on their own. They can help the doctor. So ultimately, I think the biggest success is going to be doing the visits that are appropriate for telehealth at the convenience of being in your home. So, I mean, that's really the dream. It's not going to be for everything. We're still going to have to go to clinics. We have tele-stethoscopes, we have tele-otoscopes, tele-ophthalmologic equipment, and on and on and on. You can take vitals and pulse oxes, and you can do EKGs and things like that, all from your phone. The next step is to actually make this stuff happen, and then allow the physician to be paid for the work that they're doing through this type of communication and visit. So we're, taking the baby steps. I think people understand the main concepts. If we can push this idea out to the masses and have people start utilizing it successfully, then we can start building on, these dreams. And it's going to happen. We just want to be in control of, like I said, our own telehealth destiny in Wyoming.
I think you have time for one more.
Hi, good morning or almost afternoon. My name is Andrea Rosedale. I'm with CenturyLink, and I have a curiosity question, and that is that when a doctor is seeing a patient through telehealth, is the funding to the doctor different in the way that they get paid? Because oftentimes, money is what drives everything, right? So if the doctor is doing telehealth with that patient, are they paid via a different code? Is the amount that they paid different over telehealth than when the patient comes in? Because I think that could affect a lot of what's going on.
That was why, thank you for the question. That was one of the reasons that the first thing we did was we instituted parity. So we do pay identical amounts to physicians. We have something called CPT codes, current procedural terminology. And so what that does is we put a modifier at the end of that code, GT, and that modifier tells us it's telehealth. Of course, if they're going through our Zoom license, we can track the number of minutes, but then that's all we know. That was a clinical visit and how long it took. So, but with the GT codes, we can say what type of visit, what type of diagnosis was seen. And I've spoken with every other payer in the state of Wyoming, and they've all agreed, and they're all paying parity. So there is no economic incentive to see them in person versus via telehealth. Actually, it's much more convenient because telehealth visits actually tend to be a little bit shorter, you know, because normally you go in, you shake hands, a couple of little pleasantries, you know, ask about how the family's going. So with telehealth, you can be very direct, and then you can see a patient in one town and then immediately click over to another patient in another town. And so there's actually a slight incentive to use telehealth rather than in person. Did that answer your question? Great, and the good news is we got you back on schedule for lunch.
If you would, please join me in thanking Drs. Finkelstein and Bush. All right, that puts us right on schedule for 12 o'clock. Lunch is being served just to your right in the foyer, buffet style. So please take advantage of that, and we will convene again at 1 o'clock. Thanks.